All right. How's it going, everybody? Robert Phoenix here. Thank you for being a little bit patient with the opener today, but we got it up and off the ground and managed to include our good friends, the Crimis, who will be joining us here shortly. Welcome to another edition of the Friday FARcast. And as some of you know, the first Friday of every month, we bring on Steve and Chris from Asheville, North Carolina, and today is no exception. And we're going to be looking at some new findings with Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and some of the interesting connections that are arising out of that as it relates to things like portals. And we'll delve into a little bit of ancient history with Steve and Chris, and we'll also talk a little bit about what's going on now in terms of where we are with our current situation, with, of course, the medical protocols that everybody has been lovingly nudged into. And so we'll get into some of that and, what looks to me like a real horror story beginning to unfold in terms of how some of these substances are assembling inside of our body. So we have some footage around that will unfold here over the course of the next couple of hours, and some of which Steve and Chris have brought to my attention, and then something that I'm going to bring in if I can track it down and find it, which I should be able to. But let's not waste any more time. Let's bring in the Crimis and get this thing going. There they are.
Hi ho.
How's it going down there?
Going well.
All right. Okay, we're listening on the iPad. Like your new introduction music, kind of throwback to when we used to be just on audio, and you
right.
Nice introductions.
Right. Yeah, that was yeah. So I would craft those little intros, and I just thought, yeah, I'd like to have one for this show. I'd like to have one for all the shows, but sometimes it's hard to get around to actually like putting the little elements together. It's like that didn't really take me all that long. It took me, maybe 3 or 4 hours to do that.
Oh, just a chunk of time.
Yeah, but you have to kind of go through and figure out, well, what's appropriate for this show, and what's the imagery, and you got to go hunt down the imagery, and then you got to put those little tracks together. So it doesn't take forever, but it does take some time. So
do you do the music on GarageBand, or
I do, yeah. So I was having this discussion with Joan the other day, and I was talking about ease of technology. And when I first started off doing my website and the podcasting and everything, which was around 2008, 2009, GarageBand was so easy. I mean, it was like incredibly intuitive. It was really exciting to play with, and it was very basic and very simple. And what was interesting about GarageBand, what people may not know, that GarageBand is it's a tool, little free tool that is included with your Apple computer, and it allows you to create loops and samples and do audio things, record things. So when my first experience with GarageBand was around, must have been about 2007. And this is when Apple was still, I think Steve Jobs was still alive. It was pretty cool back then. And you could sign up for classes at the Apple store.
Yeah.
Right.
I did the same.
Yeah. So I did that. And I went in and I sat down with this guy and he toured me around GarageBand. And I think I maybe went 2 times. And I'm like, I really dig this. This is easy, fun, and intuitive. So back then they would actually have a number of like MIDI loops that were included in the loop library, right? So the difference between like a MIDI loop and just a regular like AF file is that you could actually manipulate the MIDI loop. Like you could change like in that little portion of the sample where the notes would actually occur. Like you could manipulate the sound inside of these little MIDI loops. And then you could, so let's say the MIDI loop was for a piano, right? It was like a piano kind of melody, right? And one thing you could do with a MIDI loop is you could throw it into GarageBand, and then you could go find like a synthesizer patch, and you could find like a particular keyboard, and then you could use that instead of the piano part. And now all of a sudden you've got a whole different thing, right? It's sounding very, very differently. And then you could actually manipulate where those notes were inside the MIDI loops. They don't do that anymore. Like you can't do that on the new GarageBand. Like they give you just these straight kinds of like, AF files that are not really all that flexible. But what they do give you is give you a plethora of all these amps and all these other add-ons, which, and compression and all this other crap that makes it, not as intuitive.
Right.
So, I mean, it was really a lot of fun and very, very dynamic. And I remember getting really excited about making music, and I'd go out and I went out and I bought like, I don't know, like, 2,000 samples and loops from people that would sell them on eBay. And then you would just upload them into your GarageBand library, and I was buying like sound effect add-ons from Garage Center, right? So I was really getting into this, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to move up and go to the next level of whatever kind of production there is. I think it was whatever the pay model for Apple was. But I kind of stopped there, and then I stopped doing it. And then when I eventually came back to GarageBand, it was completely changed. And it goes back into even when I started to start off with, making my own websites. It was like so easy.
Yeah.
You had WordPress, and then WordPress, it was always HTML responsive. So it didn't matter like, where you put HTML, you just grab HTML. If you knew a little HTML, you just throw it into your window, your browser. So you could type right into which many times you didn't want to do that, because if your computer crashed, you were screwed if you lost your content. So you could do everything like in Word or whatever, and then bring it over. But you could put your HTML tags in, and it was super easy, right? Well, now on a WordPress site, they have this thing called Elementor, and you have to kind of edit through Elementor. And what you're doing is you're essentially like editing through your sidebar in your program, which the windows are really small, and they don't even it's not even responsive to HTML. Like if you go to put HTML into the Elementor, it doesn't even recognize it. So you have to go in and you have to find the HTML widget, and you have to somehow figure out how the HTML widget you're going to be able to bring that into like whatever it is you're working on in editing, and it's not intuitive, it's not easy. And for me personally, it's one of the reasons why I kind of stopped writing, because the way that, and the person who created my website, God bless them, they put a lot of hard work and time and energy into it, but it's not intuitive. And so it's like I go in and why do I want to write? Because it's almost like I have to struggle with an alligator to do that. And again, it's this evolution of supposedly technology and making it better and giving us more bells and whistles. And really, this goes back to, and you may have even seen this, Steve. There's that documentary, Oblique Strategies, with Brian Eno, and he talks about like, give me like 3 or 4 really, really, really good options instead of like 20 mediocre ones. And I totally agree with that. Like, you don't need a ton of bells and whistles. All you really need are like 3 or 4 really good, simple, dynamic, elegant things that you can use, and everything else is usually more superfluous.
Yeah.
So
iWeb was really good.
What's that?
iWeb, the Mac.
iWeb, yeah.
But it ended up no one supporting it anymore, including Apple.
So that was a big controversy. Like Steve Jobs had all these people that were developing things, right? And he just cut them loose. And I think that's what you're talking about.
It was an easy program, like you talk about intuitive. I didn't have to spend any time learning it. And the same experience I had with iMovie, whereas when it first came on, it was really slide over here, cut here, do this, that, and the other thing. Then it got complicated beyond belief. Now, thankfully, they've returned to sort of the original format where it's much easier now, back to where it was originally. I think we must have got a lot of complaints. Nobody's using it because it's just too ridiculous.
Yep. And I just started to, well, obviously I did that intro, right? So I've been playing with iMovie more, and there was a period of time, which is what you're talking about. And I'm in there and I'm just lost. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, this thing is, if this is supposed to be a consumer ready product, it's a total fail. So I gave up on iMovie. I just stayed away from it. But now I've been playing with it again, and you're exactly right. It's just because I wasn't, I didn't play with it when it was easier and simpler. But I guess that's where it is now, because I'm able to do shit. And,
Yeah. And the same is like when I put up a new book on our website, I have to go back all the tutorials over and over again because I just can't hold it in me. But that's it. I'm the one who has to do it. So, so it's, and I do it from the WordPress site itself. But do I got to go to a widget? Do I need to go new book? It's just, it's there's no clarity with it. So
yeah, and the thing that can be tricky with WordPress, anybody that knows where you have to continually update whatever you have with WordPress.
You just have to set it on automatic.
And sometimes when it's updated, like shit changes, right? Like on the 15 minutes of Flame side, the reason you have to do updates is because if you don't do the updates, it makes your site susceptible to hacking. So all your plugins have to be updated and everything. And then, so I did that on the 15 minutes of Flame site, and all of a sudden in the Google browser, like stuff isn't showing up the way it used to. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Right. So, and before I did the updates, again, it was easy. I could, I can't even get Chat Tango to show up now in the sidebar on Google Chrome. I actually have to go into Safari to actually view the chat now. So I basically have 3 windows open when I do the show. It's just, it's crazy. And it sounds like these are first world problems, which, maybe they are, but this is the world that we're living in, and these are the tools that we have.
Well, you know what Chris would say, it's intentional.
No, I think it's intentional.
It's just,
I think it's intentional as well.
I just think it's just to make you crazy. Is to keep pulling the rug out from under you, so you never get comfortable.
Yeah.
That's my That's my perception of it.
Yeah, and I also think that like if you go into and look at like the newer versions of WordPress and Elementor and all this other stuff, that they have a lot of things that are set up for like WooCommerce and sales, and it's almost like they made a choice to be almost product heavy and sales heavy versus say content heavy or content centric, right? And they almost like they push the ease of development with content to the back, and they brought up all these other like carts and all these other things, you know, to the fore because that's what they thought people wanted. And I think we've seen this in other like industries, like the auto industry is a classic example. I mean, cars were really basic and simple for a long time. And then they came along, and of course the environmental stuff kicked in, and that screwed up engines and really poor catalytic converters and all these other things. And then the computer boards started to come in, and you had to have all these computer chips and all these things that, you know, sensors. And again, you know, it kind of makes you crazy, right? You know, because they just keep changing the template or whatever it is. And, you know, I had a 63 Ford Falcon. It was one of the most perfect engines ever made.
It is 61.
Perfect. I mean,
My
you
first
know,
car.
yeah, you can work on it. It was easy. It was a 6-cylinder, relatively,
On the column.
yep, relatively fuel
Came off in
efficient.
my hand one day. Whoops.
Well, one time my Falcon, I was driving in San Francisco, and I was going up, I think it might have been California Street, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so I'm driving,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have to hit the brakes really, really fast because somebody stopped in front of me, and my engine mounts were loose, and my engine actually flew off the engine mounts and went right into my front grill. And
That's hilarious.
and I came to a crashing halt. I'm like, oh my God.
And they did not have synchro mesh, so you had to come to a complete dead stop to go back into first gear.
Well, this was, to me, this was an automatic. So I didn't have
Oh, you had an automatic.
I had an
car.
automatic. So
This was my first car ever.
yeah.
I was in my senior year in high school, and I got a job with the phone company as a long distance operator, and I needed a car. So my mother's friend had a neighbor who was selling this little car for $300. And I said, okay, I'll take it. And I took out a loan. Now, this was 1967. I took out a loan, and the payments were $11 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would go every month to the bank, to the teller, and make the payments. I will coupon book. And I was so proud of myself
Right.
that I did my car payments, my $11 a month car payments. And I just I fond memories of that car. It was wonderful.
So I'll share my Falcon story because it involves Stephen Kent and Ida Maxim. This is how the Falcon came into my life. I used to drive this Dodge van, and it was this big, I think it was a 3/4 ton Dodge van. I drove around the country with it. And I told the story one time before on the show, but there was this one, I was helping Stephen and Ida move from their house in Oakland to their house higher up in the hills of Oakland. So we spent the whole day like moving their stuff. And I was coming down from the Oakland Hills, which is pretty steep. And there were two things that were a bit of an issue with my van. Number one is I didn't have a lot of gas. I'm thinking, well, can I get back to Berkeley?
It just coast.
And number two, my steering started to go out. So now I'm coming down, the Oakland Hills with not a lot of steering, which was a little scary. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I can somehow make it back to Berkeley. So I start taking these back roads, and I get past the college, and I'm going to go like up this one street, and I know I'm getting close to running out of gas. and I'm going to go down this other street, and then all of a sudden I run out of gas. Plus, I don't have any real steering on this thing. Okay, and this is about maybe midnight. All right, so luckily, like, I'm sober. There's nothing in my system. I've got insurance on my van. My license is up to speed and everything. So that part of my life was together at the time. So I get it in my head that all I have to do is push this thing down this hill, and then I'll be able to kind of coast somewhere. I don't know, maybe get close to a gas station, and it'll solve all my problems, right? So it's going up on this hill, and then I have to go down this other hill, right? So it's got to go like this. So I'm pushing this van by myself.
By yourself?
By myself. It's like midnight, right? And then this kid gets out of his van and out of his car and starts to help me. So together we're pushing my van kind of up this hill so it could go down this other hill. The problem is, again, because the steering isn't working, right? I get hung up on this curb at the top of the intersection where these two streets are kind of like in a hill. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, just keep pushing. We'll pop it up over this curb, and then I'll just coast down. So we're rocking the van, and then all of a sudden I pop it up over the curb, and then all hell breaks loose because the van starts taking off.
Oh no.
And my dog is in the van too, by the way. Okay. So I'm holding on to the steering wheel of the van. And
wait.
No, I'm on the street. All right.
You're pushing with the steering wheel.
I'm pushing with the steering wheel. The front door is open.
Like the door's open. He's
open, and I'm pushing with the steering. Yeah,
okay.
I'm pushing with the steering wheel.
Okay.
Right, I'm pushing with the steering wheel, and all of a sudden the van takes off, and I can't get in the van.
Oh shit!
So I'm being dragged along the street. All right, and so then I'm thinking,
How old were you?
I was around 30.
Oh, 30.
38, about 38.
Old enough to know better, right?
Oh, way better. So all of a sudden, my life was an interesting place at that time. Okay. So all of a sudden I'm like, I just got to let this thing go.
No kidding.
There's nothing I can do about it. Like, it's one of those moments etched in my head forever. And so I just let go of the van, and there I'm watching it just roll down the hill. I have no idea where it's going to go. I have no idea where it's going to stop.
Was it filled with their household stuff?
No, it was filled with things from my life, right?
It was empty. Okay.
It was, I was done working for them that day. So I'm watching the van just go down the hill. And what happens is it kind of angles off, and this is where you have angels, okay? Because it winds up hitting this Honda. There's I believe a 4-door like Honda Accord or something like that, and the Honda was parked next to a pole with a sign on it that basically said when you could park at a specific time. So it's one of those parking signs, right? Yeah. So it manages to hit this Honda, an accordion, this Honda right up against this pole. So the Honda gets like crunched with these two doors. And so the van stops, right? The Honda has an alarm. The alarm goes off. My dog jumps out of the van through the window. Now, the house that's closest to the Honda, the lights go on because they hear everything. Their front door opens. My dog races into their house. Could you imagine these people? Right. They hear all this shit, right? And they open the door and this dog comes right into their house. So they come out, and by this time I've kind of come down the hill. I'm just kind of watching this whole thing. And so, the cops are called.
That's right.
The cops, look at my license, they look at my insurance. So like, there's nothing we can do about it. Right. And then the woman who owns the car, it's like, if I was going to hit somebody's car, she was the perfect woman. First of all, she was Japanese. and she was not confrontational at all. But she told me that she had just inherited the car from her father who had died. And I'm
Oh.
like, I felt really bad about that,
Oh.
right? Because she didn't know really what to do. But the interesting part was that I think it was either the cop or the tow truck driver, because the tow truck eventually came. They got into the car and they started the car, right? It was just the doors that had been, kind of crunched. The engine was fine. Everything else was fine. So they moved the car, and then they called the tow truck company. And I knew I was never going to see that van again. And so I told the tow truck guy, hey, can you, stop by where I'm living, and then just take my van to the place and where it's going to be worked on, blah, blah, blah. He says, oh yeah, sure. No problem. So I got to where I needed to go. I emptied everything out. I never saw the van again. And that's when Stephen and Ida come in, and they had this Ford Falcon. So Ida asked me if I wanted to buy the car from them. And I said, yeah, sure, because I could use a vehicle. And Chris, I actually had to make payments to Ida, right? So I didn't have a little coupon booklet, but
How much were your payments and how much was the car?
I think I bought it for like $2,500, and I was paying them every 2 weeks. I forget, how much I was paying them, but I paid it off, and the car got transferred into my name and everything. So that's how that car got into my life, due to the fact that I had this crazy van situation. And it was a real metaphor for me. It was kind of like sometimes you just have to let go of something.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
And just surrender.
Fundamental.
Yeah, surrender, and whatever happens, like, it's out of your hands at that point.
Right.
Which is, I think, kind of where we are with our society right now on some level.
Watch it crash into the
the van,
down the hill.
Yeah, society's the van now, just rolling down the hill.
Let it go.
You don't know where it's gonna go.
Yeah.
So, how are the two of you?
I think we're okay. We're okay.
Yeah, we're okay.
All right.
Monumentally busy, I guess, but
Yeah.
so
The
that's
new
okay.
book has kept us really busy for the past month. So
that's doing really well.
Give us the status of those books.
So Walking with Alethia is which is the new book by Jean Hartigan Weiner. We talked about Hargadon Weiner, and we talked about a couple of shows about the woman who was abused by the priest in our high school
in the 70s.
and then the nun who died trying to stop it.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
her teacher, Sister Kathy Sesnick, was murdered because she was going after the priests. And so it's still an open case. And the Baltimore Sun from time to time still runs stories about it.
Yeah.
Because it's still got legs.
So we've sold, and it actually, because we delayed the release date till March 1st, so it's still in pre-publication status. And so anyone who buys it from our website gets it free of shipping. Shipping is gone kind of nuts at the moment. Priority mail to ship a book is $9 basically. So it's, and then plus you got to pay shipping costs from the printer to me and all that sort of stuff. So it's, it's getting, and plus, the shipping and the printing costs go up, but, I'm not allowed to raise, the list price of the books. So, or I guess I could. So anyway, so that's other than that.
Well.
But so we've sold hundreds, maybe probably around 500 pre-orders, which for us is,
it's astronomical for us. We're accustomed to maybe that much in 12 years. So yeah, it's been just us doing the work. And then we had a party and had our friends when we had the big push. We had 400 books. God bless our friends. They all came over and we had a book wrapping party to get them all out into the mail.
So the book is published now. You're delivering.
Well, I'm delivering
Yes.
pre-orders.
Pre-orders.
Right. Amazon.
It's in the physical.
Amazon somehow got a different publication date, and so they're saying they're selling it now. Supposedly, my printer is not giving it to Amazon, but Amazon is saying that it's selling it. So and it's not a big deal either way. This Gene has someone who's helping out with promotion, and he has connections with, I think we may have mentioned,
NPR.
like at least I've sent the book to, Terry Gross and, these kind of people that would really push the book over, over into a different, different stratosphere that we're completely unaccustomed to.
Mhm.
So I have two words for you. Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan.
How
I don't
would we
know that
do
she would
that?
do. I don't know that she would do well on Joe Rogan. And I try when my book came out, I tried to get on Joe Rogan with because of Randall Carlson, who was a friend of mine,
Yeah.
and he I just tried to get. Can you give me contact anyway?
Mhm,
But
mhm.
we shall see. So anyway, Hermes is direct.
Right.
My friend Hermes
Yes.
is direct and setting us all in good directions. So that book's doing well.
It's
I'm
doing
waiting
very well.
on shipping is also been a problem. Well, part of I'm waiting on books, and they're coming from California, so they're all caught up in
The snowstorm.
whatever blizzard apocalypses that they what do they call them, tornado vortexes, or God knows what what other name they've got for them now. Nuclear snowfall.
Snowpocalypse is what we called it last
Snowpocalypse,
year.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So so other than that,
Maybe we should call it the Snowlacost.
Snowlacost.
Snowlacost. You could
Right,
go
or
on
the snow
and do-
jobacost. Yeah.
Snow jobacost.
I'm not allowed to say that. So there's that, and then so now that I've kind of pushed and kind of done with a couple of years worth of taxes, I can get back to writing my book, which I'm trying to get out by May, by my birthday.
Oh, really?
That's my goal
Okay.
right
That's
now.
good to know.
So I'm going to push
By
hard.
May.
I'm going to get to push hard because it's been, festering inside of me like Uncle Fester.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good. I'm loving editing it. It's really good.
Well, that's great. So, yeah, I think this book that you're pre-shipping, Walking with Alethia, right? That's the title.
That's
Yes.
right. That's
Yeah,
right.
I think it's going to be pretty successful. I think you guys are.
I think so.
You're going to do
Because the
pretty good
topic
numbers
is
on
very
this.
tender right now. People are waking up to the fact that this has been an issue for all our lives.
Mhm.
And so people who've been affected by it personally, the nice thing about the book is that she's talking about how to get well, how to reintegrate the
Mhm.
shattered psyche. And so she has to tell the story of all the damage that was done, and it's horrific. So you kind of have to lay the groundwork,
Right.
but she doesn't dwell on it, and it's not maudlin.
Mhm.
She just tells the story. And then she moves into the different stages of how she got well. So it's a very useful book for people who've been traumatized.
Without giving the whole book away, can you touch on one thing that she used in order to kind of reintegrate her life?
Sure. Do you want to talk, or I'll talk about it?
Well, we could bounce back and forth, but
Well,
she had
she-
a string of
Well,
therapists.
right, but she calls it her quiet, but where she really goes is she calls it her quiet, which is like a meditation, which actually reminded me, having read Jung's Red Book. I don't know if you actually got around, not too many people actually read it. But that's sort of like all the stuff that all his later stuff is based on. And he would go into kind of like a reverie where he may have called it active imagination or something like
Mhm.
that. I can't remember
Mhm.
exactly. But he would visualize these encounters with, monks in St. Catherine Monastery in the year 400 or something like that. And he would have all these or he'd have discussions with angels, things like that. So she would go into these quiets and these visions of the various aspects of herself that were shattered off, which took the form of animals, but also took the form of her younger selves
Young
at various
child.
places, because part of it was from her great uncle, part of it was at school. So all these various parts of herself were holding on to it, because she didn't remember a thing until she was 27.
27 before she didn't even remember that Sister Kathy Sesnick was her teacher.
So much later.
That's how deeply it was buried.
Yeah. So her healing took the form of sort of encountering these aspects of herself, and then these sort of other kind of guides that would show up and help her work through all these things, and they would just show her what happened little at a time so that she could handle the reintegration. And and even as she's moving on, so it's kind of like an MK Ultra kind of thing where
It
it's
is very
shattered,
much.
but it wasn't
Like
it
intentional.
wasn't
It
like
wasn't like
full-blown.
we're gonna break you up and
Yeah, it
then
wasn't
use you as an asset
Well,
or something.
Yeah,
Well-
she didn't have alters who were doing those
Right.
kind of things.
But
Right.
this chaplain was trained in psychology, and he also was doing post-hypnotic suggestions. There were 40 other girls who came forward and said we were also abused by this. And it was not just him, it was a whole ring.
Right.
So it involved the Baltimore Police Department and, who knows what else. And so she would get these memories well up in her. At least she didn't get flooded with all of them at once, but it seems like when her psyche was ready to deal with it, these memories would come up, and then there would be some kind of an iconic figure in her mind that would sort of embody that. And then walk her out of it and show her, how to unpack it. And she had excellent therapists too, who were really, some of them were spiritual advisors and some were Jungian therapists and so
Yeah.
on and so forth.
And,
So
and each of these various aspects of herself at different ages, they all had different totem animals
yeah,
also that emerged with them to protect them and protect her. So
Well, that sounds really interesting.
it's
oh, it is.
fascinating.
It is. It's a great
And
book.
of course, then she, agreed. It took her years to come to this realization, and she couldn't talk about it. And then these Facebook groups popped up. There were two of them, of these women who were saying that this, I went to this school at Keough in Baltimore, and I was damaged. And does anybody else have this experience? So that became formed. And then they knew there were other people, but she didn't have the strength to join the group. So, but she would monitor what they were saying. And then at some point she joined them as a Jane Doe. So that was her first step. So she came forward in that persona. And then as she got stronger, then she came out and said, okay, here's who I am, Jean Hartigan Weiner. And then I forget how the whole Netflix thing came about, but she did this Netflix series that these videographers approached her, and they were just going to do a one-off. But there was so much information that it ended up going into a 7-episode series, and it's phenomenal. And she shows up in the second episode. So they laid the groundwork in the first one, and then the second one all the way through to the 7th. It's primarily Jean telling her story and how it unfolded in her life. I highly recommend it, even if you just join Netflix just for that and then ditch them again. It was really excellent. So she's, kudos to her. She's
It's a very brave thing. But I'm getting lots and lots of replies from people who've gotten the book, saying how important it is to them. As you might imagine, it's probably like 90% women who are buying the book. Anyway, it's helping a lot of them heal and all that. So on that level of it too, it's very gratifying for us to be able to put out something that is important to a lot of people.
She comes from a big Catholic family, so she has a lot of support. And her brother is what?
Now I laugh because it's like, I've sold books to like everybody in her family.
Yeah.
And so here I am publishing since 2008.
Yeah.
And other than Chris's niece Diana, like not one book sold to anybody in my family.
Oh, so yeah. Oh, you're talking about family.
Talk about my family, not one of them gives a shit that we publish books.
Oh well, that's neither here
Well,
nor there.
what is the saying? Like you can't be a prophet in your own family or something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
that's it.
maybe that's what it's saying. But
Can't
her brother,
can't make a profit either. So
Well,
But
yeah, I think you're going to do well with this book. I think that it's going to be probably the biggest seller you guys we'll have on your, we'll have
It's
had on
already,
your,
it's already.
Well,
And we're
which
hoping
is
that it
great.
will have some kind of a wake effect, that will pull in the other books, that people will start to look at the other books that we
Right. That'd be
offer
cool.
for sale,
That'd be
which are
cool.
Also excellent. But Jean's brother is a retired judge,
Mhm.
and he's been extremely supportive of her brother Ed. And so, he kind of shelters her and helps her through, and she's got good protection.
So this case is still open with the Baltimore
Yes.
PD.
Yes,
Wow.
and it keeps on coming up because it's an open case, and it keeps on coming
I didn't she
coming
just go
up,
to
but it
court?
never goes anywhere. And you can get this from watching the series. It's obvious because this guy was the chaplain for the Baltimore Police Department and the
Oh.
Maryland State Police,
Right.
and he was farming out these girls to politicians. I mean, who the heck is there to prosecute him?
Right.
And then he ends up basically losing his marbles, and maybe he was just so tortured inside that ate away at his brain. But at the end of his life, he's just kind of like this drooling guy in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Everybody abandoned him.
Yeah.
So better than nothing.
But,
Yep. Well, speaking of open cases, I was listening to an old episode of Art Bell this morning.
Oh,
It just happened to kind of, I ran across it, and it was from 1996. And the guest was Joyce Riley. Do you remember her, Joyce Riley?
No.
So
More-
Joyce Riley was an Army nurse, and she was the person that was exposing Gulf War syndrome.
Mhm.
And this is when all these guys were coming back from Iraq, and they were really messed up, really, really messed up.
Really messed
And some of them displaying Guillain-Barré-like symptoms,
Hmm.
and nerve degeneration, cognitive decline, and not only that, but they were passing it on to their family and their wives, right? And so I was listening to this, and what happened is that they all got inoculated. Like all the guys and women going over to the Gulf War got inoculated.
Mhm.
And there's also sort of the backstory of depleted uranium that,
Right.
might play a role in their illness, but they all got inoculated. And she said something that was really interesting, in that because that was the coalition of the willing, and all these countries went in to go get Saddam Hussein, right?
Mhm.
Which is ridiculous. But
Mhm.
the only country where the soldiers did not suffer any of the similar effects of Gulf War syndrome was France. And apparently France did not inoculate their soldiers, and they gave them large amounts of amoxicillin, every day during the war. So the French kind of
Really?
knew something.
So what was that for? What
Well,
did that do?
that's antibiotic.
I know.
Yeah.
But why-
Prophylactic
but what's,
antibiotic.
yeah.
So the
that's
French knew something. Like they knew something was up. So they weren't going to put their own people at risk. And Joyce Riley, in this episode, talked about how these guys, and this is all in real time because they're going to the VA. The VA is not really helping them, but they're giving them penicillin. And Joyce Riley says the penicillin will make it worse. So you have to use amoxicillin in order to help
interesting.
you get through, detoxing the stuff that they've
But you could
injected into
actually
your veins.
detox it.
Yeah. And so it was very interesting to listen to for a couple of reasons. Number one, Dan Rather came out and at that time and said that it was just all nonsense. That this whole idea of Gulf War syndrome was fake.
Bilderberger, Dan Rather.
Yeah. Yep. And so once that happened, it was like they just shut the lid on it and then
Close the conversation.
But the reason why I thought it was interesting is because here we are, we're in 2022.
Yeah, man.
right? And we're dealing with something very similar. We're dealing
Worse, yeah.
with the effects of what's happened to people that have, given their consent to this medical technology.
Well, this is what Tom Renz is bringing out
Yeah.
with the Department of Defense medical records. And he just, with Senator Ron Johnson, he just did 5 hours of testimony. I mean, it'll bowl you over what they've done to the military.
400,000 military
I just-
miscarriages.
So
Really?
that's right now. We're talking about right
That's right
now.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been reading about that, and it's crazy. Like what's been happening to the people that have consented to that, and I think there's like a 300% uptick in cancers with them as well.
Oh, it's just this
Yeah.
astronomical numbers and birth defects. And this is only DOD. This is not the general population. So even talking about the amount of, not abortions, miscarriages, astronomical, cancers through the roof,
Right.
et
And-
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and obviously, and then the heart situations and heart
Yeah.
attacks on
Airplanes
essentially young people.
crashing into the South China Sea. What happened to that pilot?
Right.
Was he inoculated?
Right. Yep. So, there was no closure with Gulf War syndrome. They just swept it under the rug. I think Joyce
Yes,
Riley wound up having a show for a long time after that. I think it was called Power of Our Power or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, that does not happen without some kind of a treasonous collaboration within the ranks of the military.
oh yeah, for sure.
That's treason. And
Yep.
what's happening today is treason, but how many octaves higher than Gulf War?
Right. I mean, it's significant, but it's like the case wasn't closed, right? Just like your
Right.
case in Baltimore,
Interesting.
Right.
wasn't closed. And because of that, we're dealing with what's really interesting too, is if you go back and you look at that period of time, astrologically, Saturn was in Aquarius. And it's the formation of this global event, which is the Gulf War, right? And what happens? Well, you get a bunch of soldiers that are inoculated, and you get Gulf War syndrome, and we have Saturn in Aquarius rolling around again.
Mm.
And what happens? Same thing, right? Different
Only
story,
Matt,
but bigger, much bigger this
Right.
time.
Right.
right?
As my favorite, the opening line of Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. I keep going back to it. As a screaming comes across the sky, it has all happened before, but there is nothing to compare it to now.
Wow, that is a pretty epic line. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to come out of this Ron Johnson stuff?
Who knows? Someone commented that there was not one other senator or congressperson who sat in on those meetings. It was just Ron Johnson. And he's
Yeah.
not gotten any support visually from, or manifestly from, any other government official. But 5 hours of testimony, and it's earth-shattering testimony. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. Well,
How
I
can
think
you know? You can't know.
I think that the COVID narrative is coming to an end for a number of different reasons. And mainly because I think we've hit this mass saturation point where people are starting to really see what's happening. Like the bodies are starting to pile up. You can't deny the fact that over 50 athletes are just keeling over in the middle
Keeling
of.
over another Greek young person, like 20 years old. Just
Yes,
this
absolutely.
past week.
Yep. So
And what
you-
about the
so-
fibers in the thing?
yeah, we could look at that. We can
That was
pop that
fun.
in here. So this thing is like coming to a grinding halt. You're watching some countries stop the mandates.
God bless the truckers.
Right. So, but this is where I think it gets tricky, because we know that this is only one small part of a much larger operation to bring
And
us
it's a wounded animal at this point.
Yeah. So, and then you look around and you see that all these capitals, including Ottawa, including Washington, D.C., are building these massive kinds of cement
Mhm.
ramparts and barriers around them.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they know that the people are going to lose their shit.
I hope they do lose
Yeah.
their shit. I hope they do.
Yeah.
And I think it's all going to snowball into this moment. And I think part of it is also connected to the money and the financial global Ponzi scheme, which COVID has been a big cover up for, right? It was like kind of the last rating of whatever kinds of assets that they could, pull
Right.
out and throw out through the building back these businesses through the, PPE loans or whatever, right? Like massive amounts of money got transferred when Trump was president during that time. And the globe itself has reached this debt limit, right? There's no way that through the Ponzi scheme that the debt can ever be repaid, period. End of story. So
Definition of a Ponzi
yep.
scheme.
They've reached the end of that economic model. There's nothing more that they can really draw out of it, right? So the whole thing has to collapse.
Right.
And I think COVID provided them a brief period of time where they could stave off some of the economic like carnage for a while. And do what it's doing, which is what we've been witnessing, which is affecting the population. So I think we're in a tricky spot right now.
Well, it's a
because of-
very dangerous spot, is it not?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had to let the cat back in. He's crying
Yeah, poor
outside.
Chen, we let him outside for a little bit.
because
So
of whatever happens next, right? Whatever happens next is going to be bigger than what happened before.
It has to be.
Yeah,
It has to be.
yeah.
Because it has
Yeah.
to obliterate everything that came before it.
Right, exactly. And they don't want people to have these conversations that we're having, right? They want to have like a different, oh, well, we got to talk about the Russians and we got to talk about the Ukrainians and, we have to talk about the threat and the pact that Xi and Putin just made, right? Like,
Go ahead.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, but to counter it on the positive side, in a sense, is that the difference between what this whole last couple of years and the rest of it is that it's not abstract. It affects each and every one of us. We all know people who have, I'm pretty sure we all know people who have died from taking the jab. We all know. And I don't know anybody who really died, but I'm sure people died from disease and all that stuff. But anyway, we all have been touched by it. We've all been touched by the lockdown. We've all been touched by the rape of our freedoms. So this is different, and they can run the Ukraine thing all day long. But the fact is, it's an abstraction.
Nobody's buying it.
And everyone's still living. That's why there are movements in so many countries. And it really hasn't ignited here yet.
Not yet.
At all, as far as I can tell. And as you pointed out, and we've probably talked about that, just when the early on, just when people started going against the forced shutdowns and lockdowns, then you had the summer of Floyd.
Right.
It fell right on top of it. And then that flipped. That flipped the whole thing on its head, so that you couldn't go up. I mean, remember they were talking about, oh no, you can't wear a mask to a protest anymore, right? Remember that?
Yep. Yep.
Because of Antifa wearing masks and things like that. And they were people were putting in laws for such things.
Well, another thing that I see that we didn't have, decades ago is the internet. And I do think that that's played a massive part. Now, yes, we have incredible censorship, but everybody's found a backdoor around it. And you've got instantaneous information at your fingertips if you want to find it. If you're not curious, well then, oh well. However, I do think that the internet has made an incredible difference in the people's ability to push back and organize. And without that, they, it would have been game over a while ago.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Who was it? Was it Brzezinski who complained about the internet?
Did he?
Yeah, I think it was Brzezinski who complained that the internet was the one thing that was getting in the way of their
Even with the censorship,
of
and
their
it's been
plans.
brutal.
Yeah, and there are a lot of gatekeepers on the internet, and but I do believe that it has been like if you go back and look at the amount of people that were engaging, say, in this type of like research or deep diving 10 years ago, like it's a fraction of what people are doing now.
No,
I mean, it's a huge amount of people, and you can have conversations now about, well, like for instance, trauma-based programming, right?
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon now to be able to have those kinds of
How many
conversations
people
with
knew
people.
about that?
no.
You know?
You can bring it up in conversation, and everyone's at least got a basic idea.
Yeah, at least they'll listen.
Exactly.
7 years ago, when I was trying to talk to my friends about that, someone said to me, well, why would I want to know that? What good is it going to do me to know? What? Well, maybe you could not vote for the person that you find out has been doing satanic ritual abuse on your grandkids,
Right. Yep.
But now people have some understanding of it because they've been hearing it, even if it's been peripherally.
Even if it's an attack, even if it's only via attacks against it, because they've had to deal with it. They had to deal with Pizzagate, even though it involved completely falsifying what Pizzagate was about and then attacking it. So they called the straw man thing or something like that, right? Right. You build up the straw man and then you attack it.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, the whole Pizzagate thing, I brought this up, is like McCarthyism, right? It was the same model. You bring up the red threat, and which is true. I mean, there was a red threat. You throw up a few scapegoats, like Paul Robeson and a few other people who did have communist backgrounds, and then you sweep it under the rug, and then you demonize Joe McCarthy, and then you look back at it and say, "Ha ha, wasn't that funny?"
Yes, that's how I grew up, thinking, he was just a nutcase.
Right.
And Lyndon LaRouche was a nutcase.
Right.
Well, and we're thinking this is probably going to be our next show, because we're in the early stages of putting stuff together about and I guess because we've been reading Malachi Martin and how the communists infiltrated the Catholic Church and flipped it starting in the 60s and 70s, with the theology, the
liberation theology.
Liberation theology.
In South America.
And how the popes dealt with this. It's really very fascinating because it's playing out now in the same way. It's like they, kind of how they overtook the Catholic Church is the same way that they're overtaking everything else. And I'll admit, through going to college, I had Marxist professors, and we just talked about the stuff, and if I wrote my paper, I took one sociology class, and whatever position that person had, I took an opposite position. As long as I articulated my argument, I did well. No, it was never an indoctrination type of thing. No one, this is what they believed, and you got to believe something else, and you work it out, you argue about it. But that's not the case anymore. And part of what we're looking at is how they got into the education system. And I just realized recently that a number of times we talked about the New World religion, and we talked about various possibilities. But in point of fact, Marxism, I think, is the New World religion that they're trying to foist upon us, because they're making it a religion now.
Looking to see if I could find, where is that anyway?
No.
I came
Yeah,
across
it's the worship of the state, right?
Yes,
mean,
well, I
that's-
came across this very,
Right.
very good, was it YouTube? See if you can
Yeah.
find it. This guy is going over not just Marcuse, but what's the other guy's name? A Brazilian
You
Marxist.
see, that's why I'm not ready to talk about
Yeah,
it.
we're not ready, really, and he is laying out that Marxism is a religion.
Mhm.
And he's got all the quotes and all the passages to inform what he's saying, and that this is something that should be dealt with at the Supreme Court level, because it is being taught in all of the schools. This is what critical race theory is based on. And
Right.
he's showing they are calling it a form of religion.
Mm.
So that would be one way to pull it out by the roots.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Something
no,
else you
I'm
wanted
not
to
gonna
say?
find it. I said but I think that's we'll
If I
we'll
find,
have our ducks
we haven't finished listening, but this
ducks
guy's
in a
really
row.
good.
But anyway, yeah, I can send it to you later, but it's just,
James Lindsay is a very good source for this stuff too.
Is he?
Yeah. James Lindsay
not up there.
knows like Marcuse and
Adorno.
Gramsci and all these characters like
Right.
inside and out.
Mhm.
And he's able to articulate how their ideas have been applied to the mainstream, and actually helps people not only understand it and decode it, but uh, attack it and go on the offensive against CRT. And I think my sense is that the gas is running out on some of this stuff too, right? Like if you look at BLM and what happened with BLM, it's like the grift is over.
Right.
Right.
The leadership is gone, and they've made their bones. They bought their homes. Alicia Garza is now running around for Klaus Schwab, right? And there's this other thing going on where COVID money went into BLM, and they're starting to look at that and how that's been kind of like almost like a money laundering scheme.
Yes. Justice
So
Department now is looking into it, actually, whatever that means.
Yeah. This is the website, the
new
channel.
discourses. Yeah, that's James
Yes.
Lindsay.
Oh, it is.
Absolutely. Oh,
he's
that's
very
him.
good.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal.
Oh, James Lindsay's brilliant, and he's
phenomenal.
funny. He's really, really funny, and
Yeah.
He knows his shit.
he does know his shit. And so
He's-
when he was the guy that along with the professor from Portland State, Bogosian,
Mhm.
they did these fake papers where
Right.
they right. So he was behind that.
I don't know the fake papers.
Right.
What's
They
that?
would all these journals, or gender studies journals started popping off. And it's just to give, if you talk about upon a money laundering scheme, it's like that, you create these journals. And so professors who are the people they put in there for gender studies and things like that can just send in articles, therefore their credentials, right?
Oh,
Therefore they get tenure, because
I
a lot of
see.
times tenure
Right.
depends on whether
right.
what you
Publications.
published.
Yeah.
And then they just started, whatever, putting in like the Bible or whatever, just anything, just copying and pasting it, and putting a paragraph at the beginning and the end, and sending it to them. This is what you're talking about.
Well,
And
what they were
accepted it.
doing is they were taking extreme versions of either intersectionality or critical race theory, and they were creating these papers that were like borderline absurd, but they
Mhm.
were using all the jargon, all the buzzwords, all the language that goes along with CRT speak. And they were getting them published. Like these, not all of them were published, but some of these papers got published, and they were actually piggybacking on somebody else who had done this, I think back in the 90s. And it was a professor, and I think he was a physics professor. And so he wrote this like, crazy, bogus physics paper that was accepted. and he did it because he wanted to show that as long as you use kind of the language of
Mhm.
the day,
Mhm.
right, that it would be accepted. So they did the same thing, and eventually Bogosian got censored at Portland State. So he couldn't, I don't think he could do any research under his Portland State professorial banner. And then eventually he had to leave Portland State. Peter Bogosian is,
That's like, yeah, that's
so you'll see him in conjunction with James Lindsay.
okay. That's
with this
academic
stuff.
excommunication, right?
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah. And so the thing that's interesting about James Lindsay is I've watched him over the past couple of years when I first discovered the new discourses. He's actually really grown politically. Like he has
Oh, he
seen
matured.
things. Yes. He has seen things in different ways now that he did not see prior to,
Aren't we
say,
all?
yeah. And so I think he's now looking at the world through a more quote unquote conspiratorial lens, right? Which is before he was just trying to defend the fact that we were being assaulted, by this group of people who were very dangerous because they wanted to change how we
Yes.
thought about reality.
Yes.
And so it's been fascinating watching him evolve through this.
It'd be interesting to bounce off some of his works. So in this one, he's talking about this Brazilian Paulo Freire,
Yeah.
who was
Yep.
at the epicenter of all of the critical race theory and Marxism,
Yeah.
how that
he-
infiltrated into the United States.
he knows this stuff inside and
Oh,
out.
he's really good.
And
He's passionate.
yeah. And he's a Gemini too, by the way.
Okay.
So he's got that Gemini ability to kind of
Gotcha.
break things down and put them back together again. And
That's great.
I'd love to have him as a guest, but I don't think I'm a big enough fish. So, well, there are other stuff we wanted to talk about today. Do you want to move on to some of those topics?
Sure.
Yep, that's
Sure.
good. Yeah, yes, and to bridge, I can this quick bridge into it. So 2015, Chris and I visited Göbekli Tepe, which is the 11,500-year-old site in eastern Turkey, close to the Syrian border. And it was really, somehow I think that's what kind of triggered a couple of things with us, and it started us into this, as you said, this sort of investigative journey. Really kind of began then. I wrote my book when we came back, and and then Chris really started delving into things, and we just started. I think that's where we began really uncovering what was going on, even though we were full born, 9/11 official story doubters from the get-go. So we were, predetermined in a certain sense, to find these things. So Göbekli Tepe, just for a quick introduction, is the other interesting. So Göbekli Tepe kind of becomes known right around moving into the year 2000, right? So early in the 2000s, really the first reports of the excavations there, and it's the oldest sort of temple-like structures that we have seen. So I think Chris and I were really affected by just being there. We were there for 2 days, and then because there was all sorts of stuff with the Syrian border going on and ISIS and all that sort of stuff between Turkey, that we thought it very prudent to not spend much time there.
Because Turkey at the time then had 2 million refugees.
2 million Syrian refugees and all that.
And they were coming into that area in Şanlıurfa, which is in southeast Turkey.
So nearby Göbekli Tepe, this October. So I guess the point I was trying to bring about, so just interesting the timing of when these things come into the public eye and they become unburied. sort of like it's very interesting that the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library come right after the first atomic detonations. All of a sudden they come out. Is there a connection? Is it synchronous? Everybody can come to their own conclusions. So Göbekli Tepe is unearthed at the beginning of the millennium. And this becomes, they started digging just before the lockdowns at the end of 2019. And it was in October that the first sort of official press releases of the excavations. It's about, I forget what it is, it's about maybe 20 miles from Göbekli Tepe. So it's close by. And so this is called Karahan Tepe. Forgot I didn't give it its name. So Karahan Tepe, it's supposed to be a little younger than Göbekli Tepe. And what it is, it's there's a bunch of things, but there's 3 subterranean chambers, right? So what you're looking at here is one of them. And so all those pillars, except for the one that's curved towards the right, are actually part of the bedrock. So they're not placed there, they are part of the rock itself. And that floor is the original floor, which is fairly smooth. So there are 10 pillars plus this one curved one, which is actually freestanding that was placed there. So that's a bit of, so that's a bit of interesting, but just go back to, first of all, the technical ability to dig all around and leave just those pillars there. And, there are temples in India and there are temples, in various places where they've done that, but it's, not an easy task.
Who, excuse me, Steve, who is in charge of this excavation?
This one there's a Turkish team in charge of this one. It's a German team in charge of Göbekli Tepe, and Göbekli Tepe had ground to a halt when we were there in 2015, and they've done virtually nothing since, for whatever reasons.
And there are supposed to be 20 of those stone circles around Göbekli Tepe as part of Göbekli Tepe.
Right.
They've only unearthed maybe 5.
Right. And that's just in that hill. So
we're gonna show a few more images here of it's Carmen Tepe.
Karahan Tepe.
Kara, Karahan, H-A-N.
Karahan Tepe. Okay.
Karahan.
So this has only been brought to the public since October.
Okay. So one of the things that I wrote to you about pre-show was this idea of time that I wanted to bring up. And the reason I wanted to bring this whole idea of time up is because I think that a lot of the historical timelines that we've been given are off. There are a number of people who believe that there is 1,000 missing years of time.
Mm-hmm.
These are significant scholars, not just somebody on the internet who's looking at like a video from San Francisco on Market Street. But there's this growing like school that believes that the timeline and the historical narrative that we've been given is off. And
Send
there's
us some links. I'd like to see that.
And the obfuscation of these events have been put into like the historical canon by people like Scaliger, right? That there's this whole story of the theoretical West that has been this kind of controlled narrative, right? And so we come up with this figure of like 9,000 BCE. And like, who comes up with that, right? Like how, I mean, and we're so quick to just say, well, carbon dating is infallible, which I don't believe is necessarily true. So I think this is interesting. The uncovering of these, these pieces of a prior civilization are interesting. I'm openly questioning the timeline of these narratives because I think in some ways that they're a lot closer to our present history than we're being led to believe. And again, it seems like the guy who is in charge of how this narrative unfolds is Graham Hancock. And I'm not alone in thinking that Graham Hancock is some kind of a gatekeeper. Like if there is a story about ancient history or ancient culture or ancient time, it's always coming through Graham Hancock.
True.
And it's whatever Graham Hancock says is, well, that's
And Randall
gospel.
Carlson.
yeah.
Randall's-
And so
Go ahead,
I think that, again, I think these things are important, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say about them, right? Just in general, and like the timing of how they're coming about. I just think that the times that are associated with these things, we need to just be able to question them, because I'm
So
not
you
sure.
don't want to have a tight
Well-
grip on a timeline. You
Well,
want
I
to be able
don't
to
necessarily
have at
like
least
who is to
conversation
say
around-
who is to say that in 9000 BCE, right? Who's saying that, and what are they basing that on? And
Well,
So they're basing it.
It's archaeologists.
Well,
are
they're
saying
they're
it, so-
basing it on several things, right? But they're basing it on an established timeline that they have set.
exactly.
Right. So if they say, the established timeline says people started making pottery of this sort with these sort of ingredients at this time, right? Then they started using these ingredients. Started using these pigments and things like that. All right. So that's kind of what they based it. So this is pre-pottery, right? So they don't find pottery shards.
and
So they say,
pre-agriculture.
well, it has to be before that. So that's one way that they do that. Carbon dating is the other.
But you can't
and
carbon date
You can't
stone.
carbon date stone, but you can't carbon date the artifacts that might be there. Or if there is pottery, I think you can carbon date pottery maybe to a certain extent. But but I got your point. And so maybe it makes more sense to look at time not in years, but in eras. So, right. So in other words, so if you look at like our friend Randall Carlson, who, looks at all those ice,
Symbols and-
those ice testing things that go down, right? And he says, look, there was more carbon in the atmosphere. We're actually in a low carbon area, to go against the carbon narrative, right? The
Right.
carbon is evil narrative. So he looks at those sort of things, and what he comes to, whatever timeline you want to look at, that whatever caused the Great Flood, which would have been hitting the last ice age, hitting the 5 mile thick
Mhm.
ice
Sheet of ice.
in the Canadian American border, which is where he thinks it hit, that either a comet, meteor, or whatever, and that caused this massive instantaneous flooding, right?
Well, that's what Graham Hancock says too, right? That's his.
Right. Well,
that-
they
that's
went
his thing.
together. Yeah. He's
Yeah, well, Randall Carlson went out there and
Right.
looked at it geologically.
Right. Now Graham Hancock has nothing to do with the dating of Göbekli Tepe and these things, but he takes those dates and does his things and does the and the other thing that they do with it is the archaeoastrology,
Astronomy.
right? Archaeoastronomy. So in other words, this Göbekli Tepe and this one also in particular line up to the star Deneb as it was 9000 BC. All right, so that's the other sort of correlating factor that they use, if they want to project actual years on things. So
Isn't that a fixed star? Like,
It may
wouldn't
be.
it?
It may be. I don't know.
Yeah, because-
I mean, if it's a fixed star, it's not going to deviate very much.
it might not. That's something I don't know about, or whether it's the
Like
whole
some fixed
constellation.
stars will like, for instance, Regulus. But if they deviate, they don't deviate very much over a period of time. So they could use Deneb as a marker for 9,000 years ago.
Mm.
But I'd,
Well-
you could
well,
probably go back and look and see where it was,
Well, yeah.
astronomically, astrologically, and see where it is now. It may be by a variation.
Well, it isn't much.
of
It
three
isn't
or
isn't
four- Yeah,
much.
it's not much.
Well,
So
tell 'em about the
I
couple
feel like
of-
that even using that as kind of a marker, like, well, okay, it's still
Right.
kind of around the same area,
Right.
right?
Well,
Well,
you're
there-
setting up the preconditions for your own success when you're doing that. So what's interesting, so one of the things we see here, and you get a better picture of other places, is this head in the middle of the picture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was interesting.
And that's
Like,
amazing. And it protrudes out. So it's almost like a snake with a head.
Yeah,
Now-
that was kind of
So
fascinating.
we watched one video of the, you've heard of the Megalithomania. So I guess the people who are the head of it were there on this past winter solstice. And so they found that a shaft of light went through a particular channel and lit up that head.
And it was just
And it was like this,
serendipity that they happened to be there, and his
yeah,
partner looked over and she saw that, and
right.
they just happened to be there.
So
at
there-
that particular
So there
time.
is, so yeah, that's the picture. So what they did was, so to your point, Robert, that, so there's the light hitting it on the winter solstice, going through
In
some
2021.
sort of channel. So when they went and programmed where it would have been 9,000 years ago, that light that's kind of halfway down the face would have illumined the whole head. And to show how little,
Right.
correct, that Deneb has moved,
Right.
or the sun in that particular time. So while, the years may be different, what I'm saying, this is the beginning, because it would have been at the end of the last ice age. I think, the floods and all that, whether it was 11,000 years ago, whether it was last Thursday, it's still, it's still a sequence of events.
Right.
Right. And that our particular iteration, the long cycle. So you've got cycle after cycle. We've got the American cycle, you've got the Greco-Roman cycle that wraps around that. And then the long cycle is this 13,000 half of a cosmic year cycle,
Mhm.
right? Where these temples were in existence, whether that cycle is, as Plato says, 25,920 years, or whatever it is, right? This is still, I think, what I'm seeing is that we're having these things unearthed at what
At
we
nodal
feel is the
points.
end of a cycle. The beginning of the cycle is being opened up and revealed to us,
So it's somehow significant.
where this particular iteration we're in began.
Well, I think it's interesting that you're making this connection between these two sites with right around 9/11 and now. I mean, I think that's interesting because we're kind of in a slow motion version of 9/11.
Mhm.
And 9/11 was the end of a particular era, right? It was like, it's like, okay, this age is over. And then we're moving into this other age now, right? That's in large part, that's what that was about. And so according to you, they discovered the first site, and now they discovered this site during, I think that's interesting,
Mhm.
right? Like, the timing around these things. So what do you make of it? What do you make of the fact that they've popped up during these particular times? And what would you infer from that?
Well, it makes me
Well,
think of Peter Kingsley,
right.
what he talked about when we studied with Peter Kingsley here in Asheville. He talked about, at this point, what is needed is to resound the original note of the civilization. So the civilizations have, if you see it as an octave, so you come to the end of the octave and it's in deterioration. So it's on a downside and it's pixelating. In order to revivify and continue with life in a meaningful way, it's important to resound the original note and to refresh. So you refresh your computer, you refresh the screen, you refresh your civilization, and it's infused with this new energy, this new momentum. So I think that it could be seen as that sort of a program that would do that, where you take the information and the energetic from the original opening note of the civilization, and then you start anew.
Well, also to close it. It's essential to have it closed correctly.
So these were all
Right.
closed ritually, And
Right.
it would be important then for us to, and he always said that the important role that we play is to bear witness to the disintegration. So it's important that we witness what's happening. That could just be all that we're here for, is to witness and see what's happening, and then to be part of
Right.
the new sounding.
Right. So, so much of what I write about is where that original note, and what I'm writing about is the Greek world mostly, and what that has to do, with infusing what we're doing now and bringing it to some kind of close. So I think so I think that these things are being revealed and opened up at this time to show what this note was that we began this with. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to interject that it's important that we recognize the language that's being used is the language of the octave and the note,
Mhm.
and that everything is based on frequency. So even in the Hindu philosophy, you see that you have the Nada Brahma. So everything is vibration. So you've got the doctrine of vibration with Kashmiri Shaivism, and that we've recognized the importance of frequency. So we use the language of the octave and notes to explain or help us to understand, how is it that it came into being? Why is it's in disintegration? You can see it as the Kali Yuga now. It's the closing, it's the Iron Age. And then we'll be born out of that, the ashes of that, the phoenix will rise. The compost pile will give you fertilization. It won't be the same garden. It can't be the same, but the disintegration of that garden and all those nutrients are very fertile. And then that makes for a very lush and healthy new beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
So we just have to process all the shit that we're going through, right?
We do.
In order to do that. So this is just my personal theory. My personal theory is we've gone through two antediluvian kind of epics.
Mhm.
Like there's one epic which I think is connected to structures like what we just saw in Turkey, and I do believe they're quite old, right? I think there's another period after that, and we may have some disagreement around that, but I think there's another period after that. And these are the two major kinds of cycles of history for me that we have to reconcile. A much older period, a newer period that I think has been swept under the rug and is not really being talked about unless you're on YouTube and you're somebody like John Levi or Martin or Mud Flood University, right? Or Mud Fossil University. That's where these things are being talked about. And I feel like those things to me are both valid and true. Like there are two major epics at the very least. So sometimes what happens, I think, is they get put into one bucket, or sometimes they'll just, one part will be dismissed while the other will be looked at from a certain point of view. But getting back to your original point, Chris, which is like sounding the note or the octave, because we are coming to the end of this age. We know that, like it's all collapsing in on itself. And some of the things I've been talking about this last week have been along those lines, which is in order for us to move into the new time, this is just me, I feel like we have to talk about things that are unresolved and important and are difficult discussions so that we can move into this new time with kind of a fresh slate. And that gets into some very delicate territory and, things a lot of people don't want to talk about. But if we don't talk about them, if they're not part of the conversation, then we're starting this new time period in a way that is hollow and false and has a very poor foundation for whatever comes
attached
next.
To the past, attached to what you're bringing the worst with us.
That's right.
Next, which is not what we want to do.
That's right.
Which is why this whole thing is important. Yeah, you can finish your point if you.
Well, no, I mean, it's pretty much, that's my point. I mean, we're going through a reset. I mean, this is unequivocal. We are going to go through a reset. We have gone through other resets in other ages. We've gone through even resets during our time. Like what happened with the Great Depression is a reset. Like there is a reset of our, in like what you got, we were talking about this yesterday with the Federal Reserve and taxes and the entree into World War I. That's all part of a reset. So this idea of resets is we've lived through some of them.
1947.
We've seen
47. So much. I wish I had kept a list. So much happened in 1947. It was pivotal.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any at the top of your head that you can?
Well, CIA.
Yes. Yeah.
The CIA. The
space program. Well, you had Roswell, right? Was that 47?
Yeah. You had the Dead Sea Scrolls. You have the other things. You have the CIA. I forget the what's the other one? Not the
Was it Nuremberg is Nuremberg in 1947?
Yes, Council. Not the count. Was it the Council of Foreign Relations? Is the other one? Yeah, the Council of Foreign Relations. I think begins in 47. Also,
I started to notice that.
Yeah,
this date kept coming up. I imagine remember you used to do that, Robert, on your show. You would pick a year and they'd say, "Oh, this is what happened. This happened. This happened."
Yeah.
This happened.
Yep.
Yeah,
and you know what happened? Wikipedia, which I'm going to do for 1947 right now, used to be really rich with all these things that had gone on during, and they started to cherry pick.
Oh, the United Nations, yeah.
United Nations is in 1947. Yeah.
You said 46, 47, between the two. It's,
Oh, look at that. You have the Black Dahlia murder in 1947. That's pretty intense, right?
I kicked myself that I didn't just write them down every time I came across them because they were like crazy.
Because Wikipedia has kind of.
Yeah, Wikipedia really started to trim and manicure a lot of their historical data. Oh, look at that. Tom and Jerry, 1947. That's important.
Voice of America.
You got the Hermes V2 program rocket.
That's
in 1947. What else do we have?
Right. You can talk about
the first Volkswagen
paperclip, where
look at that. The IMF starts in 1947.
IMF, that's what I was trying to think of. Thanks.
And what about like Tavistock, like the Frankfurt Institute? No, was that
that was later, but Tavistock is kind of around them.
Truman Doctrine.
What else do we have here?
Here you go.
The Best Years of Our Lives is actually a really good movie. Have you ever seen that?
I
may have, but
it's with Frederick March, and it's about 3 World War II vets that come home. It's actually really good. It's like it's one of those movies that doesn't portray World War II in the best light in terms of the effects that it has on the people that come home from war. It's actually a really good movie.
We're only
Jackie
up to
Robinson.
March. Yeah, Dead Sea Scrolls, you already said.
Right. Right there, April. Jackie Robinson signs a contract with the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Bath Point. What about Israel? When was Israel formed?
Israel's 1948.
48. Close enough.
It's in the Ark.
They were plotting. They were plotting in 47.
Well,
right.
King David Hotel was around then.
I think the King David Hotel probably gets bombed around 1947, maybe a little bit before.
Oh,
then.
Look! So Australopithecus africanus skull is discovered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a big year. You got a post-war constitution in Japan, so that means the Marshall Plan's kicking in, right? And the industrialization of Japan takes place. Let's see. David Lean, Great Expectations. David Lean is a great director, by the way. I think he's one of the really great directors of
Peter O'Toole losing for Lawrence of Arabia, one of the worst Oscar moments of all time, and he never wins. Again, except they tossed him a Lifetime one at the end of his days.
Lawrence of Arabia is an amazing movie.
That's phenomenal.
A phenomenal movie.
It's incredible.
Yeah, you never get tired of watching that.
It's just incredible movie, and the stories that he tells about being a part of the production with David Lean are really good too. If
He really owned that part too. He
he
wasn't.
was amazing. He was amazing.
Doomsday.
Now, did
Clock.
Lean also do Bridge on the River Kwai, or was that Attenborough?
That was, I think that was David Lean. I think that
Oh,
was,
here you go. The Marshall Plan.
yeah, the Marshall Plan comes in, right?
That's a
Because
big
of
deal.
the new constitution with Japan. And that's when this is really the beginning of globalization, right? Because now all of a sudden they're going to use Japan as a cheap labor force.
Right.
Right.
Everything,
And
remember?
Remember, that was the big thing growing up. Oh, made in Japan.
Everything's
made in
made in
Japan.
Japan.
Yeah. How we should only be so lucky
Now we
Right.
wish.
to have our products made in Japan.
They
Yeah,
look like fine works of art,
exactly.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely. What else? The Doomsday Clock. There's the Marshall Plan.
It's not a-
Saab produces. I always liked the Saab, by the way, as a car. Let's see, what else do we have here? Harold Dahl claims to have seen 6 unidentified. Oh, this is one of the first UFO sightings, and you got
Right.
a Men in Black
Down.
encounter,
Yeah.
1947. Very
I started to
interesting.
notice, like, this date just kept coming up.
This is the big one, the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting near Mount Rainier. That's usually considered like, the grandfather of all UFO sightings in the United. Like it kind of kicks everything off.
Right.
Well, when was the Foo Fighter thing in California?
There you go, Roswell.
July.
Yeah, you got Roswell. Oh,
But
we
like the
got
Battle of Los Angeles, when was that?
I think that was during
during the war.
World War II,
It was
actually.
during the war. So it
During
was
the
earlier.
war.
It was
I think it was that like
43 or something?
Yeah, I think it was like 1943. Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh, I remember reading that.
Discovered 1947.
Mm.
Okay, we got a malaria eradication program. How fun. The AK-47.
Huh.
And then here's Roswell.
Kalashnikov.
So you're right, Chris. I mean, 1947 is
It's a hotbed.
Oh, this is interesting.
Totally.
July 18th, Truman signs the Succession Act, which places the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the Senate next in line after the Vice President.
Oh,
Isn't that
interesting. Isn't that interesting?
Truman was a big time Mason.
Huh.
He was not very bright at all. He was not a very bright guy. And he was definitely somebody who was fingered, right? And you remember when they had the headlines, Dewey wins, and he was holding up the newspaper.
Yeah.
And he was smiling.
Chicago Tribune.
Yeah. And I think that was an election that was probably thrown.
Yeah.
Right. They
Yeah.
brought Truman in, and
How much do I bet?
Truman, I think, if I'm not mistaken, appointed Louis Brandeis to the Supreme Court.
Brandeis University.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then
Look-
and because what's his name? Was it not Wallace Stevens, right? The guy who was the follower of the painter, starts with R.
Yeah. Rourke. Nicholas.
Rourke, who was a follower of Rourke, who
Nicholas
was
Rourke.
who was the vice president under Roosevelt, and then he leaves to
Not Rourke, but
It was Henry Wallace.
Henry
Henry
Wallace.
Wallace.
Henry Wallace.
Remember
right.
we did a show on
Rourke?
him a
Yeah.
long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's so he would have been then following Roosevelt had he stayed as vice president, but he got kicked out because he called Rourke his guru in a
Right.
letter.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. Wallace was a different kind of cat for sure. Yeah. Look at National Security Act,
Oh, there you go.
1947.
That's
That's
big.
it.
That's
CIA.
big.
The start of the
Department of
CIA.
Defense,
That's a big
Joint
deal.
Chiefs of Staff and the National Security Council. Boom.
That's a big deal.
Everything gets put into place here,
Right?
doesn't it?
Look at it. I
And
mean,
that's
it's
the
just like
and that's under the control of the Dulles brothers.
make your head spin.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's see.
What else do we have? Anything else interesting going on?
No, let's just keep going along. Petition in
Um,
India, Pakistan.
A lot of communist kind of activity, of course, post World War II. Excuse me.
Oh, and the Air Force is created.
Right.
National
Yeah,
Security Council.
USAF, National Security Council, they all become effective on September 18th.
Here you go. This is funny. A moth lodged in a relay is found to be the cause of a malfunction of the Harvard Mark II electromechanical computer, logged as the first actual case of a bug being found.
Oh my, where do you see, where's that? Right
It
there?
says September 9th.
Right there. Oh my God.
See? Isn't that funny?
That is kind of
That's
crazy.
funny.
Yeah. The Information Bureau of Communist and Worker Parties is founded by the International Communist Movement. That's on my birthday. How about that?
Oh, September 22.
Here we go. The House of Un-American
There you
Activities
go.
Begin.
starts in October
Yeah,
of 1947, which is what we were talking about earlier.
that's right. So October 4 to 7. Good to know. Will we remember it? Who knows?
You got Chuck Yeager, the X-1, the Bell X-1 rocket. This is a huge year.
It's huge. The first televised White House address on the
Mhm.
5th of October by Truman.
Right.
Big
Let's see.
deal.
Anything else we got going on here? John Bardeen and Walter Bratton under William Shockley at AT&T's Bell Labs, United States, demonstrate the transistor effect.
On the 6th, Meet the Press makes its debut on NBC.
Right. Very interesting. The United States Conference on Trade and Employment begins in Havana, Cuba. Conference
International
ends with-
Telecommunications Union becomes a
McCarthyism.
specialized agency.
Right there. Boom. Right there.
There you go.
All right,
McCarthyism.
there you go.
Yeah.
Check out November 29th. UN General Assembly votes for the United Nations partition plan for Palestine.
So this is a huge year. I mean, the modern world as we know it is being like implemented. The post-war
Yep.
modern world is happening in 1947.
Riots in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
December.
So this is obviously a nodal year. 1913 be another nodal year.
Right.
Yep.
So, so to your point, I mean, it's just like these nodes. If you want to talk about them in years, you can, but it's really just, understanding that there are points in time and, whatever astrology is going on that feeds into it, that's
Wasn't
what
Trump born in 47 too?
Was he?
I think he was.
could be.
Let me just see. I
Chris
bet
was
he
born in
was.
49.
I'm 49, so he would be my brother's.
Let me just see. I bet he
So
was.
you were gestated in 48, close.
A twinkle in my father's eye.
Let's see. Where are we?
Charlie
June.
Gorski.
June. We're in June, are we?
That would be funny if Trump was born in 47.
I thought he was born in 40. I could be
Who
wrong.
knows?
I could be wrong.
No, you're not finding it?
No, I'm guessing it's
no.
earlier.
Yeah, he could
I'm
be
guessing
earlier.
it's earlier. I think he's
Ronnie Wood was born in
Who's
1947.
that?
a
Guitar player.
guitarist for-
Laurie Anderson. Laurie Anderson was born.
Really?
Laurie Anderson goes that far?
Wow.
Yeah.
I saw her one time. She was actually really good.
She's a performance artist, so she knows how to perform. And she would start. She started doing stuff like in the streets of New York City, where she would have that weird fiddle and she would play it. She would like put ice skates into blocks of ice, and then she'd go on the street corner and play until the ice melted and walk away. There's just that kind of passive
that sounds like
modern
her.
art.
Yeah, right. O.J. Simpson and Larry David born in 1947.
Okay.
So there you go. There's some interesting. I think maybe Trump was born in
1946.
46.
June
Yeah, the
14th.
year before. That's right.
Ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Well, June
Um,
14th.
Yeah. So, and just before we quit,
Dissipate?
I do want to look, if you pull up one of the pictures of like the overview of Karhan Tepe, because there's one more thing that I think is important that I want to talk about.
Okay. Was that in the email? Was it a download or was it a web link?
Could have been the last article has a really good picture of it. In other words, like an overview. There's three.
But is it a link
It's
or
three
is
parts.
it embedded in
It's
the
a link
email?
it's linked to an article in the newest email that I sent you.
Okay. So
That
I
had the
think
picture
I
of
have it
Karhan.
up here. Hold on a second. I pulled
It's
up
from the Daily Mail.
Yeah, it's right here. Okay. Oh, yes. It's our friend Graham Hancock.
No, not the Graham Hancock one. There's one from the Daily Mail, but that might work, but there's like, they have the one from the Daily Mail, which was the newest.
All right, hold on. Let me see if I can find so I've got, let's see, you got, I think this might be it right here. The art newspaper.
Well, I just need an overview picture to
Here.
describe
So this is what you sent me.
this site. Okay, see if we can scroll. That's like an overview of the site. And let's just see if there's a good overview picture. All right, so that's the thing we saw with the snake head coming up. So that's part of 3. Nope, this is not
see
the
if you
one.
can find the Daily Mail.
Okay.
If not, you can go back to the one that you had up before that had a couple of pieces. The thing is that I want to point out is that this is most likely an ancient initiation site. And there's huge amounts of snake imagery. I mean, really long, like benches with snakes along the side of it. And then snake formations cut in. And it's a subterranean place. Whereas Göbekli Tepe is more or less more angel imagery, or the watchers, the T-shaped pillars are humanoid. Yeah, that's it.
Oh,
So there's a
look at that. That's
great
good
shot of the head, which may or may not be bearded. It's kind of hard to say.
Mm.
But I'm looking at that. That's the one with the 11 pillars inside it. So I'm thinking then that's like the revelation. Here we go. All right. So
Yeah, this is good.
so this is really clear. So what you have are these 3 chambers. Now, the one that you don't see fully in the left is a very large one, and that would seem to be a place, and there's benches along the side where a place maybe there would be chanting and what have you. And then in between that and this central circle with the pillars, and again, all this is cut out of the bedrock. All right, this is all just dug away. Right, which as we know takes a fair amount of technology,
Sophistication.
so yes, you can say, oh, but they didn't know how to make pottery, but they knew how to make this, right? So there's a hole between this far left one and this circular chamber in the center, and it's about
70
we figured about 2.5 feet.
centimeters.
And it's a passageway, and that hole is the one that lines up through the other ones with Deneb. So somehow there would be in some sort of initiation where you would pass from there into this middle chamber. And was the revelation had to do with the snake head? Was who you can only speculate, but it seems like in the Eleusinian mysteries, right? They would have these certain chantings. You would take the Kaikion, and then you would have the revelation at the end of the mysteries, right? And I'm looking at that as the revelation. But also, if you scroll back to that one, I don't think you can see it in this one. So then you see it almost looks like a sperm, right, with his
Yes,
tail
it
coming
does.
out.
Yeah.
Somehow that was some sort of, I thought it's some more snake energy, but it may have just be water that ran into there somehow. Now the one on the right has a pit. So that I find really interesting. So that pit was dug out obviously for some reason. And I don't know that there's a connection between these 2 chambers it was easily whether these were probably roofed over in some way. But again, the pit may have also been another a place of initiation, for example, for a ritual burial. And then you see above the pit, there's this long bench, and you can't see it here, but along the bottom of that bench is a snake, is a
You can
snake
sort
carved
of
into
make
the
out
side of it,
a raised up line.
right? So
you mean over here?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So right on the bottom of that, so some kind of bench. So somebody was in there doing ritual chanting, maybe. I think about the Soma ritual and the Vedic Soma ritual, where you would take Soma and you would be ritually buried, and you would have these, these rishis would be chanting, for a week over you or something like that. So it's not like dropping, taking Soma was not like dropping acid, and walking outside and saying, wow, man. It's, it was done in ritual. People were chanting the whole time.
It's a rebirth.
Right. So
Rebirth
you
ritual.
reemerge. So who knows what direction it would take? You re-emerge from that pit maybe, and then rejoin the community, or if it was a youth ritual thing, you would become a man. I don't know. I can't be prejudiced and say the women didn't use it, but
I bet you they didn't.
but I'm likely thinking, especially because there's a guy snake sticking his head out in the middle of it, that it was mostly men, and women would have something different going on. But it appears to me that this is sort of the sister to the Göbekli Tepe, which is all risen up, right? It's all above ground. All the pillars are above ground, and they all have these T shapes, which I think are the watchers or the angels somehow being, and the angels and the snakes, because we talked about this when we talked about the Yazidis, right?
Yes.
The peacock angel and the snake are intimately connected. So there's this weird connection. And I
And
haven't,
with circles too.
right. There's a weird connection between snakes and angels. And these are the two, and I see these two centers of ritual centers as being the opposites of being one for the subterranean, the snake part, and the other for the watcher angelic part. And that's the bet, so that's what I'm coming up with looking at this stuff.
That's excellent.
Interesting.
Imagine being in this middle circle, and it's completely dark. And then on the solstice, the light just cuts right through the dark, and that face is illumined.
Right.
You're not accustomed, we're so accustomed to light at night with electricity, but can you imagine the impact that would have had? That would be a revelation in and of itself.
Yeah.
Be like Zardoz.
Zardoz, yeah. So and then surrounding these are a bunch of these little rooms, and they've uncovered something like 200 of these pillars in all these various sections and various rooms, and and we don't know, so again, no one has really any clue, but they all have really, well formed, like those floors, those smooth floors are how they were.
Right.
That's what they got down to.
I have not heard anyone talk about seeing any kind of carbon markings, like from a flame to illuminate the chambers.
Right.
Not that it didn't happen, but I just haven't heard anyone say
Right.
that.
Like Newgrange, there are no fire markings on it. Yeah. So it's really
crazy, that face.
It's really, really curious stuff.
Well, I think it's interesting that the Göbekli Tepe is uncovered right around 9/11, right? And 9/11 is vertical, right? You're dealing with these vertical structures.
Pillars.
Right, pillars, exactly. And this one is being uncovered now, which is more subterranean and, maybe more occluded or occulted. And what's going on beneath the surface of the earth right now? Are there people, running around and hanging out in their dumbs, right? Or they're underground, because that's been happening. People have been building out these crazy underground shelters. So, it's kind of synonymous in a weird way, even with this time, with, what's beneath the surface of things.
The Dark Journalist has been doing, I've been enjoying him lately. I kind of go on and off with him, but he's been talking about Atlantis rising down off the coast of Cuba, and some really interesting things that he's been talking about. So you might want to look into that.
Yeah, and to go and going against the common environmental theory that things are sinking, actually things are rising.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they were, why would Obama or Pelosi buy oceanfront property?
Right.
If that was going to happen.
That's right.
Yeah. So interesting. Well, thanks for taking us to this very interesting structure.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And connecting it to some other things that are connected to other things that are connected to other things.
Yeah, we can save the creepy blood thing for another time.
Right. All right. Right. Did you?
Yeah, because I wanted to. There's apparently a Spanish researcher. I don't know if you've seen this video where he uncovers these objects in the blood.
Quinta Columna?
Is that his name?
Well,
That's their
it's
name.
the fifth column in Spanish. Quinta would be like
That's
the
what they
fifth
call
column.
themselves.
Quinta Columna.
And these objects in the blood look a lot like nanotechnology. Like they're
Right.
they're
That's
like,
not the one we're thinking of, though. What's the woman's name? She's on Stu Peters sometimes. Ruby, Dr. Ruby.
Dr. Jane Fake Ruby.
I know you don't like her, but she came up with this. I
She's
know.
She's a total fraud. But go
I
ahead.
know. But anyway, there are videos. So she's interviewing a funeral director.
Right.
Embalmer.
Yeah. Well, that's what they do. Yeah. And he's disturbed because he has been pulling out from the legs and arms of the cadavers these long white, it almost looks like ligaments. Now they have to, here we go, they have to drain the body of the fluids in order to embalm it.
Right.
And he was having difficulty. He and his other funeral directors are reporting having great difficulty in draining the fluids out. And then when they start to probe and pull, out comes this like 2-foot long white fibrous element that is not a blood clot.
But the blood clots are attached to it.
Right. So a blood clot, when you touch it, will revert back to blood. It will just, it'll break. It's very fragile and it will just, go back to liquid. This doesn't do that. It's a hard, white, fibrous substance.
Right.
That is completely, it has grown. Clearly it has grown to fill and it's the arteries, not the veins, which they said was unusual.
Some of the,
right.
Interesting.
I'm having trouble remembering now.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's pretty gross
and
to
they
look
haven't,
at, but
they haven't chemically tested them yet. So,
but he said that not only he, but his colleagues have been finding the same thing. It's very disturbing.
He felt very credible.
He did. Yeah.
So apparently we have some movement with the truckers thing.
Oh.
Well, let's see, we got here. It says early next week, the COVID cabinet committee will approve a plan to lift restrictions, starting with the restrictions exemption program. This is in Alberta. We can and must get on with our lives, restore our freedoms, and live with joy, not fear.
Why next week? Why not now?
Because it's Friday.
I guess they have to do something official. So something is happening, and somebody's saying just do it now. Don't wait it for another week.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
I don't trust them.
Well, yeah, we have been enjoying the Trudeau memes though.
Yeah,
with him like running with trucks coming after him, things like that.
Yeah, great. Did you see the interview with his half brother?
No.
It's really good.
Where'd you find that?
Jamie, whom you've met, by the way, sent it to me, and I watched it. Let me see if I can find a link to it so people can watch it. Let me see if I can do this.
Didn't know.
Right, but it sent us running back because we had a Monty Python skit night a few nights back, kind of cheer us up, and we played the Sir Robin with his minstrels. He chickened out and he ran away.
Is it as far as Trudeau goes?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find this thing. It's right here. His name is Kyle Kemper. And let me just play a little bit of it because it gives you kind of a glimpse into who he is. I won't play so. Here, let's do this. He lives in San Diego, and he's being interviewed by this woman who's part of a website called Western Standard, I believe. So they're kind of an alternative news site in Canada. And let's play a little bit of this.
Good.
He's kind of interesting. So this is Kyle Kemper. This is Justin Trudeau's half brother.
Doing the best that we can do. Well, let's find out a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about you. Like your family, how you are related to Justin. Just give us a little background.
Yeah, sure. So, I was born in Ottawa. My father's Fried Kemper. He's in kind of real estates and in restaurants in Ottawa. My mother is Margaret Trudeau. So I was her fourth child. I have a full sister named Alicia, as well. I grew up in Ottawa, loving that space and place. Went to Dalhousie University in Halifax. Had an incredible 4 years out there studying business and entrepreneurship and marketing. After that, I worked in venture capital and then worked in mobile app technology. And then in 2013, I was actually working at my family restaurant when I kind of had someone walk into my life that taught me all about Bitcoin. And it started my journey, and I had a great awakening to that, because prior to that, I would say like one of the really kind of pivotal moments in my life was 9/11. 9/11, I remember being in grade 11 at the time, and I was just like, it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. And then, I started asking questions about that. And then, in 2003, Loose Change came out. And then 2007, a movie called Zeitgeist came out. And after watching Zeitgeist, the third part of it specifically talked all about the men behind the curtains, like who could possibly pull off this? And it identified the central banks and the power the central banks have over the world, and the power, there's one great quote from, I think it was Rockefeller or Rothschild or one of them, about, I care not who runs the country, I care who is, so long as I control the money.
Right.
And that started my journey and provided kind of the impetus for crypto. And I saw it as basically Bitcoin could be this scalpel that, that removes this cancer on society. And so working in that for the last 7-8 years has been an amazing journey, and has taken me all over the world, introduced me to all sorts of different cultures and people and groups, and I'm deeply involved in that space. But I also really believe in freedom and liberty, and and our ability as human civilization to, I feel like we're on the verge of a golden age here. And one of the things about age transitions is there's generally a period of chaos that kind of ensues in that transition. And I feel like COVID represents, one of this chaos that is going to help bring about this new golden age.
So growing up then, sharing the same mother as Justin, did you spend a lot of time with him, or were you somewhat removed?
I did spend a lot of time with Justin. Yeah, I mean, Justin and I he was a great kind
he was your big brother, like
he was
12
my big
years
brother.
older.
Oh yeah, like 13 years older. So I had 3 brothers. So I had Justin, who is the eldest, and then Sasha, who is the middle brother, and then Michelle, who is the youngest brother. Michelle tragically passed in an avalanche. His body was he was skiing, doing what he loved, and he was sucked into a lake, and Mother Earth took him in, and he was a really pure, incredible soul. And so the world is stronger because that soul is within it. Sasha was a real kind of revolutionary. He was chronicling the secret war in Liberia, Chechnya, Palestine, Israel, and then he was in He was in Iraq during the invasion there, and chronicled it all. And so he's kind of an intellectual, kind of sees clearly, I would say. And then Justin always was kind of a leader, and could grab attention, could inspire people, could connect with people, had an ability to touch people, to to own a room, to be just really an amazing. And he was also really competitive too. So from skiing to water sports to canoeing, we've done so much together, and I really feel like I've learned so much from all 3 of my brothers, and my
you
mother
looked up
and
to
my
them?
father. And I looked up to them, absolutely. All of them in their own ways. But that doesn't mean to say I wanted to be them, or I was jealous of them. It's they go their own way, and and over time, for the last kind of 10 years, Justin has, moved into this, this political role. And, I dissent. I don't identify with what he's doing. I recognize, if I'm like, okay, I'm a businessman now. I'm a businessman and I need someone to be a spokesperson for my project or my company. Justin would be a terrific spokesperson for that. And I feel like that's exactly, what he's doing right now. Yeah.
Did it surprise you? I mean, we all know that Justin was a teacher, a drama teacher. Did it surprise you when he started to make the move into politics, or did you expect it? What were your thoughts?
No surprise there. That was no surprise. From him being a teacher and then an actor as well. I think he shot 2 movies. Post teaching, pre that, so that's interesting. But yeah, and then I feel like that was like in his mind, what his father did, and he watched his father live an incredible life and do all these amazing things and have amazing things and have amazing access and experiences and and tremendous ego as well. And so that was the path that he was on, and I think as well people got around him too that recognized how much power he has within him, and what what an asset he can be. And so I really people like, I'll name names like Jerry Butts, he's been there basically since the beginning, helping, whisper into his ear. And Jerry, if you're listening, it's like Lord of the Rings, Part 2, Worm Tongue. That's how I feel right now about you, buddy.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's a really good interview.
Worm Tongue was like that king that was really old, and he was running the place, running things behind the throne.
It's a really good interview. And as he goes through the interview, his feelings about Justin Trudeau become more raw.
Do they?
Yes.
Because I'm saying this doesn't jive,
So at a certain point, he kind of puts the gloves down.
Oh, okay.
And basically says, he's fucking up and he's not doing a good job for the country.
He seems very authentic and
he seems very authentic
really
and
does,
very humble, very kind. And then he even talks about his mother, and he says that when he goes over to her house, CNN is on every TV inside the house, and he believes that both Justin and his mother have been hypnotized, like they're under a form of hypnosis.
Well, I was going to ask you your opinion, but I have a very strong feeling that Justin was MK Ultra'd.
Oh yeah, I think so. Absolutely. And I think
he just has all the hallmarks.
And I think Maggie Trudeau has all the hallmarks of an MK Ultra beta kitten.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, I remember in the 70s, didn't she have an affair with Kissinger or something like that? If I remember.
I think Maggie Trudeau slept around with a lot of people.
Yeah, I remember having a thing with Kissinger, and it's like, okay, well, that's obviously not much on standards.
Well, what makes me think it is that when I read Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America, she talked about Pierre Trudeau.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how could you have a father like that and not be MK Ultra'd at that level of government?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot going on in Justin Trudeau's
because he looks traumatized. He always has a deer in the headlights look.
Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, there's the rumor that Castro is really his father, which I think is probably true.
Look at the pictures.
Which visually, you can't argue much with it.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of, and Maggie Trudeau would go down to Cuba, and Castro was a known womanizer. I mean,
But you look at Pierre Trudeau and you look at Fidel Castro, and then you put Justin in between the two.
Right.
It's no brainer.
Yeah. He doesn't look very much like Pierre Trudeau at all.
Not even remotely.
Yeah. So it's a good interview. And as the interview goes on, like I said, he becomes a lot more raw about his feelings, both towards Justin and his mother.
He seemed like
So,
a nice person.
yeah, it seems like a really cool guy, like, you
Yeah.
know, one of us, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I recommend it. It's a good,
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll
we'll
look
check it out.
it's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
It's a
All
good
right.
find.
All right.
Well, it's
Anything
another
else?
another
Hey,
First
yes.
Friday. We've
Uh-huh.
put another one in the books here.
That's all right.
Yeah.
The month can now rest.
Well, so maybe next time around, I've been bouncing off Malachi Martin's books. And so
All
I
right. So
started
next
off-
month, Chris, this is going to be your magnum opus.
well,
You're
I'm
gonna
gonna have to lean
you're
on Steve Crimis a bit.
put
It's
it
not
all
gonna-
together next month.
No.
Yeah, I have
With-
my homework cut out for me, but maybe during the month, anyone who's interested in the topic could read one or two of Malachi's books. And the one that really sparked it for me a year or two ago was Windswept House, this one. And this talks about the Vatican and all the political, games that were being played and how Marxism infiltrated the Vatican. Right?
Yeah, it's
What?
a novelization of John Paul II and what he was dealing with.
Right. And I actually saw parallels to what was going on in the Trump administration. So I have a lot of margin notes. I'm like, I'm doing pattern recognition here, and I'm seeing some really interesting parallels. And then for Christmas, Steve bought for me Hostage to the Devil.
Because I love her.
This is the book where Malachi talks about exorcisms and possession. And it's quite a ride. But that sparked the idea in me, or the thought, that what we really are facing, everyone talks about us being in a spiritual war. And who's hostage to the devil here is not the person who's possessed. It's the priest who comes in to release that person from their possession. So I started to look at it in a broader sense, and seeing that there's been a major infiltration of dark forces into the world. So
Mhm.
Yeah, and we were watching last night a couple of good old firing line shows
Oh,
with
yeah.
Buckley and Malachi Martin.
Oh yeah, Buckley's great.
these were great.
definitely worth checking out.
yeah, they were
Yeah.
on YouTube.
Yeah, well, if you do videos for Malachi Martin, there's not a lot of videos of him anyway, but they have a couple of firing line shows.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
You
they
know,
were-
he was a pretty frequent guest of Art Bell's. Have you ever heard any of those?
Well,
yes.
see, that's how this all started for me, was 3-4 years ago. I was watching a YouTube video, and in the sidebar, there was an Art Bell with Father Malachi Martin. And I think he was just promoting Windswept House at the time. And I thought, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. I think I'm going to listen to that. And it was a great interview, and it's still on YouTube if anybody wants to check that out. I think it went on for about 3 hours.
Yeah, he's a good interview. There's a lot to
Oh,
say.
he's wonderful. He's,
Yeah.
He can weave a tale, and he
He's-
can write like nobody's
He's
business.
a good writer, yeah.
He can do character
And
development.
he's got the Irish gift of Blarney.
Yeah, yeah. So I got hooked right then and there.
Right.
And that's when I picked up Windswept House. And that's what started me on the whole trajectory.
Right. And I started reading his book called The Jesuits. So where he gets into the whole communist takeover of the Jesuits. And
Mhm.
so that's all this, I think all this kind of ties into what's going in.
I think it's
going on
relevant.
now.
Well, it'll be March, right? So it'll be Pisces. Will be a good month to cover this topic, right?
How so? So why?
Well, Pisces deals with religion, and
Oh.
Pisces deals with duality and things like possession, right?
Does it?
Sure,
Oh.
absolutely, yeah.
Well, I hope it sparks an interest in some people, and maybe they'll either pick up one or two of the books. Hostage to the Devil is not an easy read if you're squeamish, but Windswept House was great. But maybe you could take a look at that, maybe listen to some of the interviews with, what's his name again?
William
Buckley.
William Buckley, that were excellent. And see if you can find the Art Bell interview. That was great.
I think there's multiple interviews with him and Art Bell. I
Mhm.
think he was a semi-regular
Was he?
guest on Coast to Coast. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
If I remember correctly. Well, all right. So you'll be
All
up.
right.
You'll be up next month, Chris.
That's it. She's got a month to
with
prepare.
a little help from my
You're
friends.
going to carry the ball. You're going to carry the ball.
Right.
But
Yeah.
by the way, Steve, real quickly before we go, I watched the 1961 championship game between the Green Bay Packers and the New York Giants on
Mhm.
YouTube last night. Parts of it.
Is that the ice game or that's
No. This is the first championship that the Packers win. They didn't play in Lambeau Field. They played in some other stadium that the Packers were playing in at that time. It was called City Stadium or something like that. And it was a really interesting watch because number one, it's in black and white. Number two, the format of the show, I mean, think of it as being like the Super Bowl, was very different. There weren't a lot of commercials. And they had Chris Schenkel and Lindsay, what's his name? The guy who used to announce for the Mets. They were the announcers. And it was amazing watching how good the Green Bay Packers were. Like they were so incredibly well coached and they dismantled the New York Giants. So you could see the beginning of the Packers dynasty during that game. And the production values were not bad for 1961. But I'll tell you what else I've gotten into watching is I've gotten into watching these old episodes of What's My Line. Do you remember that show?
Oh
Mhm. I
yeah,
used to like it.
that was a great show.
Interesting people were on that.
So again, if you're not familiar with What's My Line, it was a show. I think it started in the late 50s, and
Panel.
they would have a panel, and the panel would usually consist of Arlene Francis. She was almost always on there.
Dorothy Kilgallen, wasn't she in there?
Bennett Cerf, Dorothy Kilgallen, and then they
Kitty
would
Carlisle?
have
No.
it was Kitty Carlisle. That's right, not
Is it Kitty
Arlene. Kitty Carlisle. Yes, Kitty Carlisle, Bennett Cerf, Dorothy Kilgallen, and then they would have other people come on from time to time, and they would have somebody come up and announce their name, and they would have a job, and they'd get to ask questions, and they would try to guess this person's
They were
occupation.
blindfolded. They wouldn't see who.
Well,
who
that was
what
different because then they would bring somebody famous on,
Mhm.
Right. Okay.
And
Right.
and then they would have to ask questions about that person.
Right.
And Dorothy Kilgallen was very good at figuring. So was Kitty Carlisle, but Kilgallen was very good at figuring out what their occupations were.
Didn't Kilgallen die under strange circumstances?
So the Dorothy Kilgallen story is really interesting because
Kennedy.
she was doing a pretty exhaustive, like deep dive on the Kennedy assassination.
Oh. Mhm.
And she was the only person to have interviewed Jack Ruby twice. And she was friends with F. Lee Bailey, not F. Lee Bailey. Well, she was friends with F. Lee Bailey. But that was a different case. She became friends with Melvin Belli, who was he's the lawyer. He was representing Jack Ruby during the Jack
Oh.
Ruby trial.
Mhm.
So she started to really excavate and get into what was going on with the Kennedy assassination. And she wound up going to New Orleans because she was moving into like these mafia connections
Wow.
that were connected to the Kennedy assassination. And then she dies mysteriously in 1965. So,
Do you remember what the official?
well, so yeah, the official, it's kind of sketchy, right? Like they say that she died of overdose of barbiturates and
That
alcohol,
doesn't fly.
but it's inconclusive. Like the whole toxicology report is inconclusive. But she was despised by J. Edgar Hoover. Like he hated her. And she herself is a very interesting character.
Mm.
Like she she had this affair with Johnny Ray, the singer. Do you remember him, Johnny
I
Ray?
know the
Mhm.
name. Yeah.
So Johnny Ray was openly bisexual, and he actually is on a couple of episodes of What's My Line as a panelist.
Mm.
So she has this long-going affair with Johnny Ray, and apparently she has a kid with Johnny Ray, who is supposed to be her kid with her husband, but it's really not. And so she's she's a very
Hmm.
interesting, she's very flamboyant. Hemingway called her the best female writer of like that time. She's friends with Hemingway.
Mm.
And there's this really weird story. I watched this documentary on this guy who wrote a book about her as it related to the JFK assassination. And she had a live-in like houseman, right? Like so what we would call like a butler. And he lived in their big flat in New York, and his family lived there too. So his kids were there as part of the Kilgallen house.
Hmm.
So this guy who wrote this book on Dorothy Kilgallen interviewed the daughter of like their quote unquote butler or whatever. And she tells this story about these parties that would go on at the Kilgallen household. And she tells this story about Sammy Davis Jr. and Jane Mansfield, like being at this party at the Kilgallen house. And apparently Jane Mansfield takes her clothes off. And so what's interesting about Sammy Davis Jr. and Jane Mansfield is that they're both Satanists.
Oh no.
So Dorothy
Oh,
Kilgallen
no.
is like having these parties with Satanists
Get out.
at her place. And she's got this relationship with this openly bisexual, kind of rock
Wow.
and roller, Johnny Ray.
Wow.
Right. So
I
she's
never would have pegged Dorothy Kilgallen.
she's got this wild side.
No.
And who knows what's really going on with
Sweet Jesus.
the and Frank Sinatra hated her. He hated her. He would openly
Because she was looking into the mafia.
that's right. And he would openly make snide remarks about her body type during his performances. He would talk about she doesn't have much of a chin. So anyway, but if you go back and watch some of those What's My Line episodes, they're very entertaining. And they had a very different way of communicating back then. Right? Very different. It was way more articulate, kind of a higher level of wit. There was a level of kind of, I don't know, graciousness, right? That, it was more high, and they could be like cutting with each other,
Well,
which
this is
they
like
which they
listening
would.
to Buckley, listening to Buckley, and then he's interviewing a Monsignor and this other man who was an author who was a convert to Christianity, who was so knowledgeable, young man, so knowledgeable. And then they bring in Malachi. It was like a pig's breakfast. It was just so delicious to hear this high level conversation, well educated. And this was the entertainment of the day. This is
That's right. Yeah.
What do we
Yeah.
get now? Pablo.
Yeah. Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So when you watch What's My Line, it's just a whole different level of discourse. And it's fascinating.
And that was a New York show, not a Hollywood show.
It was a New
Oh,
York
right,
show.
Manhattan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that always made, like Dick Cavett was in New York, whereas Johnny Carson
Oh, you
was
can
in
see the
LA.
difference.
Well, Johnny Carson was in New York for a while.
Yeah.
started, yeah.
Yeah, he started in New York, and then he moved to LA, and it's a bit of a different show. And when he moves to LA, I'm a huge Johnny Carson fan. I love Johnny Carson.
I grew up, every night.
Yeah, me too.
Well,
It was
that-
just like you were sitting in on
Right.
the coolest fucking conversations.
Right.
You were kind of at this bar with these people.
He was witty, very witty.
Johnny was incredibly witty.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was, and the thing about Johnny
quick,
Carson,
just very quick minded.
is he gave people a lot of latitude on
Mhm.
his show. Like he gave them a lot of space to just be who they were, and he could roll with them. Right.
Mm.
And the most famous example is always Don Rickles. When Don Rickles
Yeah.
would come on
Oh,
Carson.
Yeah, I love that.
Don Rickles.
But you
He's brutal.
told a good Miles Davis story a couple of days ago, or and I love the one time Miles Davis was on Johnny Carson, and he was there to promote his autobiography. And Johnny, so Johnny's got his note cards with, whatever to prompt Miles on certain stories within it. And so Johnny starts prompting him to get him to tell the story, and Miles isn't responding. And, he was, when, so-and-so happens and you did this, and Miles says, oh, I haven't gotten to that part of the book yet.
Yeah, that must have been an interesting interview for Johnny. Because Miles was not easy to interview.
No.
He was difficult. I think one of my favorite moments on Carson is when Muhammad Ali starts talking about UFOs. Like it's incredible. He's on there with Ken Norton, and they're promoting their upcoming fight. And then Ali just starts talking about UFOs.
Huh.
Oh, really?
And Carson thinks he's kind of like joking around.
So this is like from personal experience he's speaking?
Absolutely. I mean, Ali says he goes out at a certain time every night and they appear to him.
Whoa.
And yeah, I mean, it's really an incredible interview to watch. And Carson is kind of dumbfounded, and Ali is like, he's deadly serious about the whole thing.
And in those days, you didn't talk seriously about that. You were ridiculed.
Yeah, you were ridiculed, unless you're Muhammad Ali, right? And you could get away with it.
Right. Boy, you look at films of his early fights or his Olympic fights, he was just astounding, before the draft thing and before he was incredible. I mean, he's just so fast. So his feet and his hands were so fast. Yeah.
He was just a remarkable athlete in that way. And he popped up on a lot of talk shows. And that one show where he's on with Mike Douglas and Sly Stone.
Oh, right. You played that once. Yeah, I remember watching it. Yeah.
It is nuts, man. It is so and the thing that's nuts about it is, first of all, Sly Stone is just yanking his chain the whole show, right? Hard. And then Mike Douglas gets into a serious debate about Muhammad Ali and race. And it's like, you would think that Mike Douglas wouldn't, go down that path, but he does. And he asked Muhammad Ali very straightforward questions like, the same system that you are decrying is the system that helped build your wealth. Right now, how do you answer some of those things? I mean, it's a really great, it's a great episode because of, you got Sly Stone on the one side, who's like completely fucking high and nuts. And then you got Muhammad Ali, who's surly. And then you've got Mike Douglas, who's, playing this role between trying to keep Sly Stone's sort of in his lane and having a serious discussion with Ali. It's actually really great. There's
some that even that daytime TV back then. What was it? Donna
Reed.
There was a Donna Reed show.
Yeah.
Right. And she had Tom Waits on once.
You're talking about
that's way back.
No, you're talking about Burt Reynolds' flame. What's her name? Oh God, I know you're talking about.
Donna Reed was in the 50s.
Not Donna Reed. No, it
was somebody else. Someone else had a show around the same time Mike Douglas, when they used to have the afternoon talk shows.
I'm going to tell you who it is right now. Hold on.
Hi, Rosie.
Give me 1 second. And I know somebody in chat is already bringing this up.
Yeah.
I know the chat's much quicker than Wikipedia.
Yeah. So let's see. Burt Reynolds' girlfriends. All right. Dinah Shore.
Dinah Shore. That's
Dinah Shore.
And I didn't even get to it. It just popped into my head.
Okay.
Dinah Shore and Tom Waits. I mean,
I think Dinah Shore she had Sly Stone on too.
Yeah.
Did she have a show?
Yeah, she did. Dinah Shore had a
Yeah, I
fairly
think it may,
popular.
it may have been on the same
Like a
time
talk
as Mike
show?
Douglas or
So Sly Stone gets on there, okay, and he starts talking about Doris Day, and Dinah Shore says, "Didn't Doris Day give you a car?" He goes, "Oh yeah, she gave. I forgot what he's like, a Rolls Royce or something. Oh yeah, she gave me a really nice car, and I just love her. She's such a nice person, right? Well, what is Doris Day doing giving Sly Stone a fucking brand new car? Well, Sly Stone was friends with Terry Melcher, who was Doris Day's son, right?
Oh,
And Terry Melcher shows up in the middle of everything that's going on in Hollywood, in the dark side of the music world,
I see.
through his connection with Carl Wilson, Dennis Wilson, and ultimately Charlie Manson, right?
Mm.
Terry Melcher, when you start to look at Terry Melcher, like his fingerprints are everywhere, from Bobby Darin to Sly Stone. He's a very interesting character, but yeah, he was on her show too.
Mm.
And fucking high as a kite.
Well,
So.
I know our listeners must be bleary eyed. We
Probably like
can do this
falling out of
forever.
a chair.
What's interesting is Sly Stone is still alive.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is still alive. Like, this guy has done so many freaking drugs, right?
Well,
He and Keith Richards are still alive. It's amazing.
Yeah. Keith
and
Richards, man.
all the
What a
Crosby's, Stills, Nash
specimen.
and Young
Unfortunately.
are alive, working on their
Working on their
16th organs.
Their Fuck
transplants.
Joe Rogan tour. Is that what they're going to go on? The Fuck Joe Rogan tour?
Yeah, rocking in the free world. Boy, what a
bunch of losers.
I had a decent Joni Mitchell collection. I just deleted the whole thing.
Yeah, are you
Okay.
serious? Did you really do that?
Yes, I did. I just deleted the whole thing.
That's
Fucker.
a statement, man. That is a
Fucker,
real statement.
and she had more gallons.
I know, that's the
Yeah.
hard part, right? That's
She's got to have some sort of medical acumen.
Yeah, for sure. And now she's just jumping on board. And you know what's happening now is they're going back and they're finding pictures of Joni Mitchell dressed up as like a pimp, because of that Mingus album, which it wasn't Mingus. It was There's the album where she's actually dressed up like a pimp.
Not Don Juan's Reckless Daughter.
It's Don Juan's Reckless Daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So now they're going back. Well, Joni, what are you doing dressed up in blackface? Right now she's,
really?
having to go through the ringer now because.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow.
Mingus,
You deleted her entire collection.
Yeah. Mingus, highly underrated album. I thought it was a really good album.
Yeah. Like, why did
Jaco Pastorius is all over that record.
So, do you think she did it out of solidarity with Neil Young or
Why?
what?
I can't imagine. No, I don't know.
Why would you feel compelled?
I don't know. And, and they're both Canadian.
They're both Canadians. That's, I think, maybe one of the reasons why.
But I don't know, and I just gave her more credit than that anyway. But I've done a lot of this actually. People I follow on Bandcamp and they just anybody.
Who else have you canceled, Steve?
People that you wouldn't know of, just obscure ambient artist, somebody who plays harp, Mary Lattimore, does some interesting harp work. I didn't have any Neil Young, but I just drew the line. It's war.
I can't listen to Joni Mitchell the same way now, I have to say.
No.
Yes, I can't listen to her anymore.
No.
I can't listen to the Beatles anymore. I can't listen.
I can't look at the Beatles anymore either. I just feel like
What about Led Zeppelin?
Every once in a while,
Right.
I have to crank up some Led Zeppelin.
I know, right? Well, somehow Led Zeppelin for me gets a pass, and they probably shouldn't.
It was my first show, 75 Madison Square Garden, Led Zeppelin, my first ever concert. So
Right.
and whatever, yeah, I know, and this is all sorts of weirdness around Jimmy Page, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole other.
But I think there was just weirdness around rock and roll back then. I don't think, of course, Jimmy Page and the whole Crowley thing, and what would happen in LA where they would hook up with 15-year-olds, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not I'm not giving them a pass, but that was kind of like the state of rock and roll then. This is what was going on.
Yeah, she was just 17. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. I think what's that song by Roxy Music, Trash? And he says Brian Ferry uses the word 17, right? Like,
Mhm.
so it's, you know, it's not like we give, but it was just, that's kind of how things were back then. And it's probably still they are now, by the way. I don't think anything has really
Right. It's true.
changed very much. So,
It's true.
all right. Enough
Anyway.
memory lane.
Well, this was fun.
All
We were
right,
all over
Robert.
the place.
All right, Robert. Hope everybody enjoyed.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of rambled there for the last half hour or so, but it was,
Yeah.
it was
All
fun.
right.
Well, they can.
Well, take good care.
LogosophiaBooks.com.
Fine
Please,
Art
please check
America.
us out. Chris on Fine Art America, Chris Crimis. You know, in case you want to support us. And yeah, thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah.
And thank you,
All right.
Robert.
You guys take care. And Chris, we'll be waiting for your star turn
I'm
I'm
next,
going to hit
next
the
month.
books. I'm not really good at being focused, but I'm going to make myself.
All right. I have plenty of faith in you.
Do you, Robert?
Yes.
I'll hang on that then.
All right.
The next
All
one.
right,
Thank
take
you.
care, Robert.
You guys take
Okay.
care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.